Chapter 387. The leader of the Taiha tribe was stunned for a moment, but he quickly realized what "it's him" meant. The clear fruit. The person who stole their clear fruit was the young man in the Yanjiao team carrying a pile of prey. Stop! The leader of the Taiha tribe roared and took 2 big steps towards Xiao Xian. He was so agitated that the veins on his neck bulged. When the Taiha people moved, Duo Kong moved too. He turned and blocked their path. What, you want to steal the prey? The Yanjiao people all stopped and looked at the Taiha tribe. It looked like they were waiting for Duo Kang's order and they would immediately throw down their prey and start fighting. The Taiha tribe, the leader of the Taiha tribe tried to control himself, but this was not the time to fight. He suppressed his anger and pointed at Xiao Xian. He asked Duo Kong, who was blocking his path, "Who is he?" As Yanjiao's neighbors, the Taiha tribe did not know Yanjiao very well, but they knew a lot about Yanjiao. They would compare people and events to each other. For example, Yanjiao's outstanding young warriors like Tao Zheng, Zhui, Wu Zhan, etc. The Taiha tribe knew about them, but Xiao Xian, the young man who stole their things, they had no impression of him at all. Duo Kong already knew why the Taiha tribesmen reacted this way. He snorted, "It's none of your business." Then, Duo Kong called his team and left, leaving the Taiha tribe to sulk. They were not as good as him and their things were stolen. They could only admit defeat. But that person, the leader of the Taiha tribe, decided to talk to their chief about this when they got back. They did not expect Yanjiao to be hiding someone. On the other side, Xiao Xian had already learned about the clear fruit from Guang Yi. So that's the clear fruit. It had been some time since the incident. After finding the tribe, Xiao Xian put all his attention on the tribe and completely forgot that he had snatched the clear fruit from others. Sometimes he would think about it, but soon he would be delayed by other things. Moreover, when they were in the tribe, the chief and the others never asked Xiao Xian to take out the fruit. They just put it aside and forgot about it. "I left it at home. I'll bring it to you when we get back," Xiao Xian said. "Ah, there's no need. Since you got it, it's yours." Duo Kong quickly waved his hand. Guang Yi had the same idea. "I don't have much use for it. It would be more effective to distribute it to the warriors in the tribe." After knowing the effects of the clear fruit, Xiao Xian didn't plan to keep all of them for himself. He decided to distribute them when he got back. The hunting team was warmly welcomed by the tribesmen. On the artificial river outside, a 10-meter-wide bridge made of thick tree trunks had been lowered. Some people came over to help carry the prey. Everyone was very happy when they heard that the hunt was fruitful. After moving the bone beast up the mountain, Xiao Xian gave the nest of tapers he caught to Zhao Ming and his brother's house. After all, when he first arrived, he stayed at their house for a night. When he heard that Xiao Xian gave them a nest of food, Zhao Ming didn't even bother to wipe the mud off his body. He ran home to take a look. There was an elder at the foot of the mountain who knew more about tapers. He told Zhao Ming to raise the nest of tapers and eat them when they were big enough. It didn't cost much anyway. If there wasn't a mother around, the baby tapers might not be able to survive. But with a mother around, it was much easier. They eat young twigs, young leaves and fruits. Oh, and by the river in front of the tribe. They also eat the grass that grows near the water. An auntie who had tried raising tapers before shared her experience with Zhao Ming. Xiao Xian helped build a circle before he was called up the mountain. The hunting team had to split the prey and the shamaness wanted to talk to him about something. Xiao Xian also shared some of the bone beast with Xiao Xian's team since they helped carry it. When Xiao Xian couldn't take care of it, they were the ones who kept an eye on the unconscious beast. After splitting the prey, Xiao Xian didn't go back immediately. Instead, he went to the shamaness. It was much quieter in front of the shamaness gate. No matter how happy the warriors were, they would lower their voices when they passed by, worried that they'd disturb the shamaness. "You're here." The shamaness glanced at Xiao Xian and put down the animal skin scroll. She waved, gesturing for Xiao Xian to follow her into the house. There were no windows in the room that was used to store things. If they wanted to see clearly, they would have to light a torch. But the shamaness didn't light a fire. She went straight to a table with a box on it. The shamaness came out with the box and handed it to Xiao Xian. "Take these." Xiao Xian recognized the box. He opened it and saw 3 elders' bone ornaments. "All for me." Xiao Xian was shocked. "Yes." The shamaness nodded and sighed. "The ancestors would be more willing to give them to you." On the day of the welcoming ceremony, the 3 bone ornaments did light up. But after the ceremony, they dimmed again. They weren't as dim as before, but they couldn't compare to the one Xiao Xian was wearing. Ever since Yanjiao's 2 tribes separated, the bone ornaments never lit up again. There were no more elders in the tribe. Xiao Xian was an exception. Seeing Xiao Xian hesitate, the shamaness said, "If the 2 tribes reunite in the future and a new elder appears, it won't be too late to take them out." "No, I'm worried about losing them," Xiao Xian said. The shamaness' face twitched. She said in a low voice, "Then wear them. Can't I leave them at home?" "No." Seeing that Xiao Xian still wanted to say something, the shamaness stomped her cane. "Wear them now." "Okay." There was a protrusion on the back of each bone ornament. There was a hole in the protrusion for a rope. Xiao Xian took off the bone ornament necklace he was wearing, untied the rope, and strung the other 3 on. Then he tied the rope and put it back on. The difference was obvious when the 4 of them were put together. Compared to the one Xiao Xian always wore, the ball in the middle was much dimmer. However, after Xiao Xian put the necklace back on, the shamaness noticed that the ball in the middle of the 3 bone ornaments was brightening at a speed visible to the naked eye, until it was the same as the previous one. Seeing this, the shamaness felt relieved. Sure enough, she had to put the bone ornaments in Xiao Xian's hands. Wearing the 4 bone ornaments, Xiao Xian came out from the shamaness place. He picked some of the game he had hunted and asked someone to help him cook meat soup. There was no big pot, so Xiao Xian went to take out the big stone pot that had always been in the tribe's warehouse. It was made by the ancestors of the tribe when they came here. Sometimes, when the tribe held large-scale celebrations, they would take out the big stone pot and cook a big pot for everyone to share. The first day, they cooked on the mountain, the second day on the mountainside, and the third day at the foot of the mountain. They cooked for 3 days in a row. Xiao Xian hunted so much game that he couldn't finish it all by himself. Besides, he originally wanted to hunt more to share with everyone. As for the clear fruit, after Xiao Xian cut it open, he found about 20 small seeds inside. He took half of it to the chief as a gift from Xiao Xian to the tribe. The other half was kept by Xiao Xian. If anyone needed it in the future, they could exchange it with Xiao Xian. After settling those matters, Xiao Xian finally had some free time. He returned to the house and took out the 3 stones he brought back from the dry riverbed to study them. On the table next to the window, Xiao Xian washed the 3 stones and placed them in a well-lit area. He carefully examined them and scraped them with a knife. The hardness was similar to the stone he got from Mute Crocodile. The quality and color of the stones were very similar, but he still couldn't tell if they were the same as the drumming tribe's water moon stones. After all, there was no drumming tribe here, so these stones couldn't have become water moon stones, right? There was no other way. Xiao Xian let out a long sigh. He turned one of the stones in his hand and recalled the harvest of water moon stones when he was in the drumming tribe. Speaking of which, the reason why the water moon stones could be successfully transformed was because of the fire seed. As he was thinking, Xiao Xian's expression suddenly froze. He immediately gathered his thoughts and observed the changes in his mind. In his mind, the totemic flame was still there, but the shell covering it was different. It was flashing. The light shield outside the fire seed flashed. Every time it flashed, it became brighter. At the same time, Xiao Xian could feel a thin thread extending out from the shell. The thread traveled along Xiao Xian's arm to his palm, then to the stone. Rustle, 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 it was like the sound of fine particles falling. It was the same sound that Xiao Xian had heard when he was at the Water Moon channel of the drumming tribe. Chapter 388. When the buzzing stopped, the line in his mind was retracted. Xiao Xian looked at the stone in his hand. Just a moment ago, it looked very ordinary, but now it was as smooth as a peeled boiled egg. The crystal had a slight coolness to it, very similar to the Water Moon stone. Just as he was about to move, Xiao Xian suddenly felt his vision go dark. It was like standing up after a long period of squatting. The blood circulation in the body was blocked, and the brain was deprived of oxygen, causing dizziness. He was a little tired, but after a few breaths, he felt much better. Xiao Xian looked at the stone in his hand again. It looked similar to the Water Moon stone. Although there were slight differences in color and transparency, it was not much different. Was it really a Water Moon stone? Yang Guang was just right outside the window, illuminating the room. Xiao Xian closed the window and closed the door. The room suddenly darkened. If it was a Water Moon stone, in such a dim environment, it would definitely emit a sparkling light. However, it turned out that it was not the same. The stone in Xiao Xian's hand also emitted light, but the light it emitted was very dim. It could not illuminate the room at all. If there was an animal skin scroll with words written on it next to this stone, it might not be able to see the words clearly. This kind of brightness could not be compared to a Water Moon stone. However, knowing that it was similar to a Water Moon stone was still useful information for Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian did not immediately turn the other two stones into the same state. He planned to sit down and rest first. He had used a lot of energy to make the stone just now, so he felt very tired. At this time, someone knocked on the door. "Elder Xiao Xian, are you there? The chief wants to see you." Someone shouted outside the room. Xiao Xian responded and put the stone on the table. He opened the window and patted some dust off his hands. This was left behind when the stone was formed. Getting up and opening the door, Xiao Xian followed the other person to the chief. Xiao Xian placed the crystal on the table by the window. The yang guang outside the window shone in and shone on the stone. The entire stone seemed to be bathed in a layer of warm light. On the other side, Xiao Xian was called to the chief's place. When he entered the house, there were already many people there, similar to the last time he came. Duo Kong, Guang Yi and other important members of the hunting team, as well as a few respected elders of the tribe, were all sitting there. There were a few more people from the hunting group, but the shaman did not join in the fun. "Xiao Xian, come over here." Chief Zheng Luo pointed at the seat next to him. In the past, this seat belonged to the shaman. Even if the shaman didn't come, no one dared to sit there. This was the first time Duo Kong and the others had seen someone sitting in that position, and the shamaness and the leader didn't even say anything. As an elder, he had the right to do so. This time, Zheng Luo had called Xiao Xian over to discuss the trade at the slave owner's territory. They would not go to the royal city. Ever since they got into trouble there, they had not been there all these years. However, they still went to other cities a few times a year. It was impossible for everyone to go, so they were here to discuss the list of people who would go, as well as some things to take note of. This kind of meeting would be held twice before departure. Today was an impromptu meeting, so they didn't inform them beforehand. "I heard that there's more demand for white animal skins this year. Do you have any white animal skins left? Sort them out properly and raise the price when the time comes." The chief told everyone what he heard. After hunting, the tribesmen would hoard the fur they didn't need. White fur was their least favorite. First, it was easy to get dirty, and second, it was too conspicuous. Wearing it in the forest was like looking for death. However, white beasts were rare in the forest, and most of them appeared in the winter, or in the snowy mountains further away. Who would go there for no reason? "Chief, do you still want spotted ones?" Duo Kong asked, rubbing his hands. Their family had hoarded a lot of spotted animal skins this year. Last year, the slave owners liked this color, so they sold it at a high price. As for the other colors, they kept it for themselves. Well, Jingluo thought about what he heard. I heard that they don't like it this year. Duo Kong stopped rubbing his hands, the smile on his face crumbling. Why do they change every year? Zheng Luo ignored Duo Kang's annoyance and turned to Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian, you came to the tribe late, so you didn't hoard much. You don't have anything to sell, but you can come and take a look. You can help everyone when the time comes. Zheng Luo hoped that Xiao Xian could learn more about the situation here, but he was also worried that Xiao Xian wouldn't have anything to sell. If Xiao Xian went there and saw the other people in the tribe selling happily, Xiao Xian wouldn't feel good just by looking at them. Don't worry, I know. Xiao Xian smiled. Duo Kong and Guangyi looked up at Xiao Xian at the same time, but didn't say anything. After the meeting, the chief invited everyone for a meal. The meat was the bone beast meat that Xiao Xian brought out. They ate, drank, and chatted. Although there weren't many seasonings here, the tribesmen were smart enough to add some fruits and leaves to the soup. It tasted good. Xiao Xian had to learn from them. I haven't eaten it in so many years, it still tastes the same. An elder said, smacking his lips. Another elder also talked about how they hunted bone beasts years ago. He even told Xiao Xian where the bones could be used. Xiao Xian stayed at the top of the mountain until sunset. It was getting dark before he returned to his house. However, when he returned, he found many people surrounding his house. What's going on? Xiao Xian asked. Hey, Xiao Xian, you're finally back. Duo Li squeezed through the crowd and ran over excitedly. Elder Xiao Xian, what's that in your house? Although the house wasn't locked, they didn't dare to enter. Even if the windows were open, they wouldn't dare to pick up the glowing thing. They weren't close enough to Xiao Xian to take things from him. Besides, Xiao Xian was an elder, second only to the shaman and the chief. How could they just take things from an elder's house? That was why they could only suppress their curiosity when they saw the glowing stone. Now that Xiao Xian was back, they were all excited. In the house. Xiao Xian didn't quite understand. He looked towards the house and understood. Although there were many people blocking the view, they could still see the light coming from the windows. Water moon stone. No, that wasn't it. The light wasn't exactly the same as the water moon stone. The color of the light was less cold and had a hint of warmth. The crowd in front of him was curious. When they saw Xiao Xian coming over, they quickly made way and fought to ask their own questions. Without answering the chattering cha-cha, Xiao Xian opened the door and walked over to pick up the crystal on the table. Even Xiao Xian was puzzled. It wasn't like this before he left. The stone wasn't this bright during the day. Why was it so bright at night? It was almost as bright as the water moon stone. He looked at the other two stones on the table. They were still two very ordinary stones. They didn't shine at all and were inconspicuous. Seeing Duo Li and the others craning their necks to look at them with expectant and curious eyes, Xiao Xian passed the crystal to them. When the crystal was in Xiao Xian's hands, the others didn't dare to touch it. But when Duo Li took it, everyone started fighting for it. Especially those who were close to Duo Li. They all squeezed over, wanting to take a look for themselves. It wasn't good to make a ruckus in front of Xiao Xian. Duo Li hurriedly spoke to Xiao Xian. After Xiao Xian agreed, he took the stone to a more spacious area outside the house and left with the noisy crowd. Once the crowd left, the surroundings became much quieter. Xiao Xian sat by the table and picked up the other two stones, wondering what was going on. Chapter 389. After a while, Duo Li returned the crystal to Xiao Xian. He was quite reluctant to give it back, as he felt that it would be much more convenient to have a glowing crystal at night, much more convenient than lighting a fire. More importantly, he had never seen it before. It was his first time seeing it, and he felt that it was very rare. Xiao Xian, where did you get this crystal? Duo Li asked curiously. Yes, Elder Xiao Xian, where did you find this stone? Can you tell us about it? Even Tao Zheng and the others came over. Before this, they had never seen Xiao Xian take out something like this. They had heard of glowing stones, but they had never seen one with their own eyes. It was said that the slave masters had some of these things, but they didn't know where they got them. Xiao Xian took the crystal and said, "This stone," everyone pricked up their ears. "I picked it out from the dried river that day." As he spoke, Xiao Xian took the other 2 stones from the table and showed them to them. Because of the glowing crystal, the room seemed to be lit by a small table lamp, illuminating the 2 stones Xiao Xian took out very clearly. "How is this possible?" Duo Li exclaimed. "This is it." Tao Zheng picked up the other 2 stones. No matter how he looked at them, he couldn't see any difference between these 2 stones and the glowing one. Xiao Xian nodded. "How did it change?" "Cut it open." "No, it's useless to cut it open." "As for how it changed, I actually don't understand it either," Xiao Xian said. He really didn't understand, so naturally, he couldn't explain it to them. They asked a few more questions about the glowing stone. As the night deepened, Duo Li and the others reluctantly left. After everyone left, Xiao Xian had time to study the stones again. This glowing stone wasn't so bright during the day. At that time, it was placed. Xiao Xian thought for a moment, his gaze sweeping across the table, then the window, and then outside. Yangguang. Or could it be that this stone only glows at night? Regardless of the situation, Xiao Xian intended to try again. Weren't there still 2 more stones? He would find the answer if he tried again. Picking up one of the remaining 2 stones, Xiao Xian mobilized the totemic power in his body. However, when the totemic power in his body was active, it was not the totemic flame that worked, but the light shield that covered the totemic flame. When the light shield lit up, even the totemic flames that had been rolling inside would appear much more subdued. A ray of light extended from the light shield and flowed through Xiao Xian's body from head to toe. It then flowed along his arm to the stone in his hand. This time, Xiao Xian paid close attention to its changes. He could clearly feel that the outer layer of the stone in his hand had been peeled off. With a rustling sound, the outer layer of the stone shattered into a layer of powder and fell to the ground. Xiao Xian didn't need to personally brush it off. The powder naturally fell off, leaving only the crystal behind. However, the new crystal did not glow. It was not even as bright as the first stone during the day. Could it be that it really needed the sun? After bringing back 3 stones, Xiao Xian planned to leave the 3rd stone until the sun came out tomorrow to try again. Just like the first stone, after transforming the 2nd stone, Xiao Xian also felt a wave of exhaustion. He sat in the same spot for a while before packing up and going to sleep. However, while Xiao Xian slept well, some people didn't. For example, Duo Li, who had also brought back a stone, was studying the stone in the house. He was so noisy that his father, Duo Kong, woke up in the middle of the night and beat him up before he quieted down. However, he was only slightly quieter and gentler in his actions. When the sun came out the next day, Xiao Xian placed the non-glowing crystal that he had transformed last night where Yang Guang was. Then, he used the same method to transform the 3rd stone. When Xiao Xian tried the 3rd stone, it was under the sun. He held the stone with his palm facing upwards so that it was fully in contact with Yang Guang. After the transformation, Xiao Xian brought the stone into the house and closed the doors and windows to block out the light. Sure enough, the 3rd stone was able to glow in the dark house. Although it wasn't very bright, it was much better than the previous 2 stones. The only difference was that it was in contact with more Yang Guang during the transformation. As for the stone that didn't glow last night, after Yang Guang placed it in the dark for a while, it shone brightly. Although it wasn't as bright as the drumming tribe's water moon stone, it wasn't any weaker than the first stone. Xiao Xian. Elder Xiao Xian. Duo Li hurriedly ran over. What's wrong? Xiao Xian asked when he saw Duo Li sweating profusely from his anxiety. This. Duo Li took out the stone in his hand, his face dejected. It's broken. Yesterday, He only wanted to study it carefully to see if he could make a stone like Xiao Xian's. But in a moment of carelessness, he broke the stone into pieces. I only wanted to cut off a little bit, but who knew that this stone would break into pieces like this? Duo Li said. Xiao Xian looked at the broken stone in his hand and said, "This requires totemic power, not brute force." It was his own fault for not reminding him. Xiao Xian handed one of the 3 crystals to Duo Li. "Take this." Eh. The other 2 changed too. Duo Li held the crystal in his hand like it was a treasure. Thinking of something, Xiao Xian asked Duo Li, "Are there very few glowing stones here?" "Yes. Very few," Duo Li said. "I heard that when people from other tribes found glowing stones like this, they would sell them to slave masters in exchange for a lot of food and gold." That was strange. Xiao Xian fell into deep thought. When he was there, although many people liked the water moonstone and it was almost a universal currency, it wasn't rare to this extent. There were other glowing stones too, but they were much rarer than the water moonstone. Why was it that after the people here merged with the fire seed, their abilities increased, but many special things disappeared completely? Could it be that it was because of the fire seed? People gathered all the power of the fire seed in their bodies, so they couldn't obtain the stones and couldn't change them? With this question in mind, Xiao Xian went to find the shamaness. After hearing this, she frowned and thought for a long time. It was ironic. As tribesmen, they had never seen a fire seed. If this was on the other side of the sea, other than the wanderers, the other tribesmen wouldn't believe it. But here, it was true. No tribe had a fire seed burning in their fire pit. The people of the Flaming Horn tribe could only see the totemic flame in their minds. However, they had never seen the flame that their ancestors brought over. No matter if it was stormy, rainy, or snowy weather, it would still burn in the fire pit without any firewood. They had never seen it with their own eyes. They only knew about it through the drawings their ancestors left behind. Even if the shamaness could see more through the wu roll, it was far from being as clear as the real thing. The shamaness couldn't give Xiao Xian a definite answer, so Xiao Xian could only find the answer himself. After giving the remaining 2 glowing stones to the shamaness and the chief, Xiao Xian decided to go into the forest again and bring back more stones. Knowing that Xiao Xian was going to dig for stones, Duo Li, Tao Zheng and the others were more enthusiastic than the other. Almost everyone in the hunting team came over, including Duo Kong and Guang Yi. They said they had to protect them in case they ran into trouble, but in reality, they were curious too. They wanted to know where the stones came from. This time, there weren't many people going out. They didn't bring along tools for setting traps, but large bags and tightly woven nets. The Taiha tribesmen who had been observing Yanjiao quickly reported this to their superiors. But no matter what, they couldn't guess what the Yanjiao people were up to. Did they find some treasure? The Taiha tribesmen didn't understand. On the other side, the people who went into the forest had a clear goal. They weren't hunting, so they didn't pay attention to anything else. Even if a fat dinosaur walked past, they didn't give it a second glance. Compared to the dinosaur and other meaty beasts, they were more interested in the glowing stones. If they could get their hands on those glowing stones, they could exchange them for more bronze weapons from the slave masters. That was the most important thing. They rushed to the dried-up riverside. Duo Kong saw all kinds of weeds growing on the riverbed and the ordinary stones. He couldn't believe it. That's it. This was completely different from the gemstones with halos he imagined. He was wondering why they hadn't seen any of these stones before, but Xiao Xian found them the moment he arrived. These stones had a common face. If it wasn't for Xiao Xian, they wouldn't have found these treasures even if they walked 1,000,000 times. That's it. Duo Li couldn't take it anymore. He took out a long wooden pole that he had prepared earlier. There was a shovel-like object at the front of the pole. He shoveled and lifted the stones from the riverbed to the bank. Xiao Xian hadn't done anything yet, but the others were already busy. They had a clear division of labor. Some were in charge of scooping up the stones, while the others were in charge of picking them up. The dried mud on the riverbed was poked here and there by the wooden pole. The dried upper layer cracked open and some of the soil was pushed aside, revealing the mud underneath. And in the mud, they could see some stones. There are stones under there too. Duo Kong snatched the pole from Duo Li and shoveled it into the mud. There really are. The stones covered in mud were lifted onto the table. Ignoring the stench of the mud, they wiped them with leaves and handed them to Xiao Xian. Are these yours too? Duo Li asked. Xiao Xian took them and examined them. Then, in front of everyone, he held the muddy stone and activated his totemic power. The shamaness had said that they were all trustworthy people, so Xiao Xian wouldn't hide it from her. Plus, if everyone could have this skill, they would be able to produce more crystals. It would be a good thing for the flaming horns. Realizing what Xiao Xian was about to do, everyone stopped what they were doing and stared unblinkingly at the small stone in Xiao Xian's hand. They didn't want to miss anything. Even Guang Yi, who was usually serious, couldn't help but look curious. However, he wasn't interested in the stone in Xiao Xian's hand. Instead, he was interested in the totemic power around Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian came from another Yanjiao tribe. The fire seed was still there. Guang Yi was curious about the differences between the two tribes. Chapter 390. Squeak squeak, the sound of something falling to the ground was heard. The muddy stone in Xiao Xian's hand seemed to have been washed away by an invisible current. Starting from the top, the outer layer of the stone crumbled and fell along with the mud, revealing the smooth surface of the crystal. Duo Li's eyes almost popped out. It looked like the crystal was wrapped inside the stone. As long as the stone was cut open, it could be seen. But he knew very well that if he cut open the stone, there would be nothing. The stone would even crumble into pieces. How is this possible? Duo Li took the crystal from Xiao Xian's hand and looked at it closely. There was still some mud on the crystal. He wiped it off with his hand and covered it with an opaque animal skin bag. There was indeed light, but it was not very bright. We need to bask in the sun for a while, said Xiao Xian. Oh. Okay, let's bask in the sun. Duo Li held the stone and stood straight where there were the most Yangguang. Xiao Xian couldn't stand it, so he said, just put it on the ground. After putting the stone where Yangguang was, Xiao Xian told everyone to continue fishing for stones. They would leave immediately after they finished fishing. They could still make it back to the tribe before tonight. Knowing that this dry river was full of treasures, everyone became excited and sped up their actions. Xiao Xian told them about the drumming tribe and the water moonstones. It was the first time they heard such a story. Everyone thought it was very strange. Was it caused by the fire seed? If there is a tribe that can continuously produce water moonstones, there will only be one result, said Duo Kong. They will either perish or become slaves, added Guang Yi. That was why everyone would only say that they dug it out from the forest. They would never say that Xiao Xian made it. Everyone who knew about this was the same story. They scooped up more than 10 bags of stones back to the tribe. If it wasn't for the lack of bags and the lack of time to weave more bags, they would have scooped up more. After returning to the tribe, Xiao Xian washed the stone and told them about his experience in transforming the stone. After all, the power that transformed the stone came from the eggshell-shaped cover, and not from Yanjiao's totemic flames. The result was just as Xiao Xian had expected. No one else was able to change the stone no matter how hard they tried. Even if the shamans did it personally, the result would be the same. Totem power and legacy power were used one after another, but they were still ineffective. Everyone gave up after trying. The totem power fluctuation around Xiao Xian was different from theirs. It wasn't unfamiliar, but it wasn't familiar either. It felt strange, but it was something they couldn't do. With a shortcut closed, it was impossible for everyone not to be disappointed. How about this? If I have time, I'll make more. The people in the tribe packed up 2 days in advance. Sheets of leather were folded and tied up. The people who went out helped carry the things entrusted to them by the people they knew. When the time came, they would bring back the things they exchanged for and distribute them. Xiao Xian was new here, so no one asked him to bring anything. He only brought a leather bag with crystals. Xiao Xian helped the people in the team carry some things. Xiao Xian caught up with the team. The team was led by Duo Kong and left the tribe. Every time they went out at the end of the year, it wasn't just a single tribe. It was possible that several tribes worked together. It was safer that way, and they wouldn't be robbed. And Yanjiao's partner every time was the Taihe tribe. After all, there were only 2 tribes in the area, and they weren't enemies. Although they often had small fights, they could still work together occasionally. It was a win-win situation. Duo Kong brought a team of 100 people to the agreed meeting place with the Taihe tribe. The other side had already arrived, but they had slightly more people than the Yanjiao. After all, not every tribe was as strong as the Yanjiao people. Usually, when the 2 tribes met, they would look at each other with disdain. They would never look at each other in the eye. But today was different. Both sides were quite friendly. Although they didn't express friendliness, they didn't mock each other either. As for the Taihe tribe's evaluation, the shaman had told Xiao Xian that the reason why the Yanjiao could get along with the Taihe tribe until now was because the Taihe tribe wouldn't stab them in the back. The Yanjiao people later took revenge on the tribes that had stabbed them in the back. They even forced a tribe that was originally nearby to leave. Only the Taihe tribe had cooperated until now. In the past 1,000 years, the 2 sides had even intermarried. Xiao Xian saw a few familiar faces in the Taihe tribe's team. They were the people he had beaten up when he was chasing the long-clawed monkey in the forest. When they saw Xiao Xian, they were already furious. When they saw Xiao Xian smiling at them, they gritted their teeth. "What the hell are you smiling at?" Chapter 391. The teams of the 2 tribes got along peacefully along the way. Occasionally, they only communicated with their eyes. At most, they bared their teeth and did not directly quarrel. Even those who had been holding their breath and staring at Xiao Xian did not directly get angry or provoke Xiao Xian. In both teams, everyone was very restrained, and those who did not know how to restrain themselves were not allowed to follow them out. The people of the Taihe tribe were sizing up Xiao Xian, a relatively unfamiliar companion. After all, every time they went out in the past, the candidates were about the same, and they did not change many people. Everyone was very familiar with each other. Even Guang Yi could recognize some of them because he often saw them and got along for a long time. He could always remember some of their characteristics, not to mention the people of the Taihe tribe. However, the Yanjiao side did not pay attention to the Taihe tribe's sizing up eyes. As Duo Kong walked, he introduced Xiao Xian to Amba City, which they often went to. There were 6 major cities here, which once belonged to the 6 tribes of Ji, Chaoqiu, Yi, Feng, Mu, and Amba. They were also the 6 largest tribes at the time. However, after the Ji tribe unified the other 5 tribes, the place where the Ji tribe was located was expanded several times to form the royal city. The descendants of the 6 tribes lived in the royal city, but the cities originally built by the other 5 tribes still existed. The Yanjiao people had also been to the royal city. Duo Kong told Xiao Xian that because they had caused trouble before, they had not gone to the royal city for a long time. Instead, they went to the nearest Amba city. As one of the 6 tribes, the people of Amba had not been idle after they embarked on the path of slave owners. Some of them followed into the royal city, while others stayed in Amba city to develop. At the same time, Amba city was also the largest concentration of tribal people living in this large area. There were also wanderers here, but the status of the wanderers here was not like the ones Xiao Xian had seen before. Because of the integration of the fire seed, their dependence on the tribe was much less. People became free and ambitious. Some people left the tribe to develop and become wanderers. Those who had the ability to leave the tribe and develop on their own were all extremely capable people. Otherwise, they would have been slaughtered long ago. From the tribe, with the speed of the Yanjiao people, it would take at least 3 to 5 days to reach Amba city. If the weather was good and they were lucky, the time would be shorter, but if they encountered trouble along the way, it would take even longer. This time, no one came looking for trouble. On the morning of the fourth day, the group arrived at the gate of Amba City. There were guards at the entrance of Amba City. Every team that entered the city had to hand over some items to them before they were allowed to pass. Xiao Xian saw that Duo Kong had already prepared 10 pieces of animal skin for the guards. Every 10 people had to hand in one piece, and it had to be of good quality. The man picked carefully, afraid that Duo Kong would give him something of inferior quality. After looking, the man's eyes circled around the bundle of animal skins on Duo Kang's back. He wanted to say something, but a few people came up beside Duo Kong. A dozen tall and strong Yanjiao people easily carried the large bundle of things. They moved their exposed muscular arms and grinned silently, revealing big white teeth. The gatekeeper didn't say anything. Thinking that these were Yanjiao people with bad tempers, he would definitely be the one to suffer if they made a fuss. After weighing the pros and cons, he could only give up. Everyone knew that the Yanjiao people dared to make trouble in the royal city. The Taiha tribe benefited because they were with the Yanjiao people and were not harassed. However, the teams that entered the city later were exploited miserably. The city was much larger than the cities in the desert, and the houses were neatly built. There were houses on both sides of the street that sold cloth, pottery, food, jewelry, and so on. Duo Kong said that more than half of the people there were wanderers. After entering the city, the group went straight to their destination, which was a relatively special area in Amba City. It was specially used by tribesmen who entered the city to trade. There were no fixed shops, so it was relatively free and more dangerous. Okay, hurry up and find a place. Duo Kong waved his hand and said to the people behind him. There was no need to say more. The people behind him began to assign tasks. Some people put down the things they were carrying, and then like a forklift, they used brute force to shovel away the people in front of them, clearing an open space, and then began to set up tents. The tree trunks that had been cut down on the way were inserted into the ground, and the framework was set up. Large rolls of coarse linen were unfolded. There were many holes in many places, but no one cared as long as they could be used. The Taiha tribe set up next to the Yanjiao tribe. Looking at everyone's movements, they were very skilled and the division of labor was clear. After a few tents were set up, the group first unloaded the goods and put them inside, letting some people guard them. The other group took out a piece of animal skin and spread it on their arms, or put it on some simple shelves so that interested traders or slave owners in Amba City could better see it. Xiao Xian helped set up the tents and spread out the animal skins, then looked to the side. Although the Taiha people also brought some animal skins, they also brought some other things. The Taiha people knew a lot about herbs, so every time they came, they would bring some herbs to sell. These sold faster than the animal skins. The people who were putting things over there saw Xiao Xian look over and immediately put on a vigilant expression. Xiao Xian calmly looked away and looked at what other tribes were doing in other places. Most of the people around sold animal skins and bones, but there were also a variety of shiny crystals. The slave owners liked to use these raw materials to make things. Xiao Xian did not take out the glowing stones at the beginning. He intended to observe them first and then set the price. There were shouts all around, and in order to attract the attention of buyers, they all boasted about the things in their hands. This one said that he had the skin of an adult tiger in the mountains, and that one said that he had the skin of a cave lion king. In short, they had to attract the attention of others first. Although the Yanjiao people's voices were loud, it was a pity that they were too honest. The skin of an adult giant bear was not as attractive as the smaller bear skin from the opposite stall. They had just boasted that it was the skin of a bear king cub, but when they were touched and recognized that it was just the skin of an ordinary cave bear, they still quibbled. Some of the stones used to cushion the table and press the tents were kicked around, and one of them rolled to Xiao Xian's side. These were all ownerless items. Everyone picked them up from the ground, or people who came here before threw them down. They were all ordinary stones. Xiao Xian picked up the stone that rolled to his feet and looked at it. The stone was not good enough to be used as a tool. However, it could be used for other things. Thinking of something, Xiao Xian took out his tools, a small stone hammer made in the tribe and a small knife. Among the many shouts and quarrels around, a series of tinkling sounds seemed very abrupt. Some people looked in the direction of the sound, wanting to know what was making the sound, but they found that someone was actually knocking on the stone. Xiao Xian waved the small stone hammer in his hand quickly, while the other hand held the stone and kept turning it, knocking out the extra places. When the shape of the stone was not regular, it changed at a speed visible to the naked eye. What is that? It could be said that when gold and pottery were widely used, stone tools were always the easiest to ignore. So when they saw Xiao Xian playing with the stone, some of the merchants who came to see the animal skins suddenly became interested and gathered around to watch. One of them was particularly conspicuous. He was wearing a dark brown animal skin coat. His tall and burly body squeezed through the crowd and moved steadily, as if the surrounding crowd had no effect on him. His two big palms were like palm leaf fans. When he pushed, the people in front only felt layers of pressure rushing straight at them. Before they could react, they were already pushed away. Seeing that person, Duo Kang's eyes lit up. He turned his head and gave a look to the people behind him. Everyone quickly spread out the dark fur animal skins and placed them in the most conspicuous place. Chapter 392. Some people around also noticed the approaching big man. The people who were pushed aside wanted to curse, but when they saw the other party's appearance, they immediately swallowed the words that were about to come out of their mouths. Most of the people present knew this person. He was a traveling merchant and was quite famous. People called him Black Bear, which was very appropriate for his appearance, especially when he was wearing a thick brown and black animal skin coat. Combined with his strong and burly figure, he really looked like a black bear crossing the border. Pushed by the people around him, Black Bear's steps were heavy and steady as he approached Xiao Xian at an even speed. Xiao Xian didn't notice the movements of Black Bear and Duo Kang. At this time, his attention was already on the stone in his hand. He knew that some people had been attracted around him, and more than he expected. Originally, Xiao Xian only wanted to see if he could use the stone carving to attract a few traveling merchants who were looking at animal skins. Even if he couldn't attract them, when the stone carving was done, the carving could be placed here as an advertisement. There would always be people who would be curious. After all, no one around used this method. Xiao Xian's stone carving skills were trained by grinding stone tools. When old Ke taught him, the requirements were quite strict. The subtle mistakes would be pointed out to Xiao Xian one by one, and then he would continue to polish and correct until there were no mistakes. Since the effect of attracting attention was better than expected, he had to be more serious. The general outline had been formed. Xiao Xian replaced the stone hammer and picked up the knife to continue. Carving again, Xiao Xian quickly got into the mood. The tinkling sound was gone, but everyone's attention was already on the stone in Xiao Xian's hand. With the flying stone chips and powder, a forest killer was taking shape. The traveling merchants had already left the hunting life. It had been passed down from generation to generation. Some of them had already stopped coming into contact with any large beasts and ferocious beasts. It was natural to feel strange to encounter such a stone carving. This is a carving of a giant bear. A Yanjiao person next to Xiao Xian cried out. When the word giant came out of his mouth, his pretentiousness immediately increased. At the same time, it also proved to others that they had indeed hunted a giant bear. How could they carve such a vivid image of a giant bear if they had never hunted one before? Although there were people who carved on bronze or other objects, they had never seen such lifelike stone carvings. This stone sculpture was very small, but one could feel the ferocity of a ferocious giant bear roaring in the deep mountains and forests. Before the stone sculpture was finished, someone asked, "How do we exchange for this stone sculpture?" Tribesmen usually asked to trade directly. Most of the people around were merchants, so they knew the tribesmen's requirements very well. Some people even took out a copper knife and wanted to use it to trade. When the others saw this, those who had the same idea also moved. They took out a knife that was slightly bigger than the person in front of them and went directly to Duo Kong to negotiate. The people here were smart enough to know that the leader of the Flaming Horn tribe was Duo Kong, who was standing next to them. If they wanted to negotiate, they would have to talk to the person with the most authority. As for the kid sculpting, he had to listen to the leader. So, the people who thought they were smart directly targeted Duo Kong. Black Bear, who had already walked in front of Xiao Xian, did not speak. His eyes were fixed on the stone sculpture in Xiao Xian's hands that was about to be completed. A stone sculpture could transmit the sculptor's consciousness. Looking closely, Black Bear could see that this small stone sculpture was actually transmitting a wild and violent aura. It really was like a giant bear waving its giant paws and roaring in the forest. If Xiao Xian was carving other beasts, Black Bear would not be so serious. It couldn't be helped. Who told him to like bears? Their ancestors worshipped bears and worshipped the strength of bears, but at the same time, they also worshipped the warriors who hunted bears as fierce warriors. Now, the tribe had become a caravan, and they rarely had the opportunity to go into the forest to hunt giant bears. However, their obsession with bears was still passed down. The symbol of their caravan was the totem, the bear. From the moment he saw the stone sculpture in Xiao Xian's hands, Black Bear's eyes could not move away. "I want 20 pieces of animal skin," Black Bear said. Compared to the others who directly negotiated to buy the stone sculpture, Black Bear's words were more tactful. Duo Kong, who was chatting with a few people, heard this and immediately called for people to count the beast skins. He even chose the best quality ones. Black Bear's reputation was not bad. No matter what his style was in other matters, at least he was very honest when it came to trading. He would not be stingy when it came to trading. There were large pieces of animal skin, but generally speaking, there was no need to specifically mention large pieces of animal skin. Basically, they were talking about small pieces of animal skin. Fearsome beasts were huge, and if a piece of animal skin was too big, it would not be easy to sell. Everyone bought it back to make clothes, so they did not need such a large piece. Therefore, there were small pieces of animal skin. As time passed, everyone formed a consensus. There was a fixed standard, and the size of the animal skin was similar. It was as if they had formed a set of quantitative units. The toll paid to the gatekeeper when they entered the city was a unit of cut animal skin. After the 20 pieces of animal skin were sorted out, Duo Kong had people stack them up and pass them to Black Bear. After checking the animal skin, Black Bear looked at Xiao Xian. "How about 20 pieces of animal skin and the stone sculpture for me? I can compensate for it with gold." The gold that people here talked about mostly referred to bronze, which was also the target of Yanjiao people. At this time, Xiao Xian's sculpture was just finished. Hearing Black Bear's words, Xiao Xian blew away the stone fragments on the stone sculpture and looked up at Black Bear. His eyes were calm as he said, 30 pieces. Black Bear's gaze went back and forth between Xiao Xian and Duo Kong. Then he looked away and nodded to Xiao Xian. "Okay, another 10, no, another 20 pieces. Bear skins are best. If you don't have any bear skins, then find something close to one." Duo Kong grinned and signaled to the people behind him to sort out another 10 pieces. While the others were sorting out the animal skins, Black Bear received the stone sculpture. He looked at it and was very satisfied. He carefully put it into a thick bag of fur that he carried with him. Then he pulled the rope of his coat, grabbed it with both hands, and opened the heavy coat to Xiao Xian, Duo Kong, and the others in a domineering manner. Black Bear's coat revealed large and small knives, swords, axes, and other bronze tools. Some of them were in the inner clothes, some of the bigger ones like axes and swords were in the waist, and some of the lighter ones were hanging in the inside of the coat. Xiao Xian. He cursed several times in his heart. No wonder Black Bear gave off such a strong sense of heaviness. It really was heavy. How could it not be heavy when carrying so many things? How was this a bear? It was practically a human weapon carrier. However, this also proved that Black Bear was indeed strong. To be able to carry so many things around every day and still live until now, without enough strength, there was no way he could have survived. Duo Kang's eyes lit up. He looked at the objects of different colors and sizes. He raised his hand and pointed at a few of them. Some were big, some were small. How many things could be exchanged for 40 of those animal skins, and what quality they could be exchanged for, Duo Kang knew in his heart. When the two sides finished trading, the people around them started clamoring to trade with them. 5, 10 pieces of animal skins were all bought. With Black Bear in front, they did not doubt the quality and origin of the animal skins that the Yanjiao people brought out. Everyone knew that Black Bear would not buy anything bad. Even if they did not know the Yanjiao people well, following Black Bear was definitely the right choice. They were not as extravagant as Black Bear, but with so many people, Duo Kang was already grinning from ear to ear. However, even if these people wanted more stone sculptures, it was already too late. In one day, almost half of the animal skins were sold. This made Duo Kang very happy. In the past, he might not have been able to sell so many in 5 days. Today, he managed to do it in 1 day. Sure enough, Elder Xiao Xian had a way. At this rate, they would be able to return in less than 10 days. At night, when they were huddled together in a simple tent to rest, Xiao Xian took the time to carve another stone sculpture. This time, it was not a giant bear, but a different kind of fierce beast. For the next 2 days, Xiao Xian would take out a stone sculpture every day. Just like the first day, he would give them away if they bought more. For those who wanted to buy animal skins, this was very attractive. Although many people could not buy dozens of animal skins at once, they would still patronize the Yanjiao area for the sake of the stone sculpture. Those who bought a large number of animal skins to take away the stone sculptures were traveling merchants and people sent by the slave owners to buy them. On the 5th day, the animal skins brought by the Yanjiao people were almost sold out. Everyone did not have to keep an eye on the goods. After exchanging them for copper weapons, food, and so on, they each took what they had and gathered together to exchange. The people of the Taiha tribe were quite envious. This time, because they had brought some relatively rare herbs, they were selling things much faster than before. But no one expected that Xiao Xian would appear in Yanjiao. Without a big order, Xiao Xian no longer carved. Seeing that there were not many things to sell in Yanjiao, he took out his own stones. For this reason, he had asked people to help look after them yesterday and let these stones shine in the sun all day. Now, as long as he took them to a slightly darker place, he could see the obvious light on the stones. In the past few days, more and more tribesmen came to Amba City. The surroundings were full of shouting and quarreling, competing to see whose voice was louder and whose was louder. From time to time, people could be seen being sent flying. Xiao Xian did not compete with them in terms of voice. Instead, he made a wooden sign with words written in bright plant pigments, a new gem that glows in water, water sun stone. The drumming tribe's crystal stones were produced during the full moon and were called water moon stones. Xiao Xian made this one to absorb the yangguang, so he changed the moon to its sun. The wooden sign was supported by a long pole and inserted next to it. There was no need to shout, just directly waiting for people to come. Xiao Xian had people turn the wooden sign every once in a while to change the direction so that people in other directions could also see the words on the wooden sign. New things were always full of attraction. Just now, there were tribesmen who were glad that Yanjiao was finally deserted. Who would have thought that not long after, they would see a large number of people rushing to Yanjiao? There was no way around it. It was just that the sign erected there was too eye-catching. Chapter 393. As soon as Xiao Xian took out the stone, it attracted a lot of people's attention. The words on the wooden sign were simple and clear, so many people didn't look at anything else and went straight to the Yanjiao area. What is it? It's glowing. It can't be nonsense, right? That seems to be the place where the Yanjiao tribe is. Their animal skins were selling well before. Let's go and see if it's real or fake. No matter what their opinions were, curiosity had already risen in their hearts. They would rather waste more time than miss out on any possible rare item. For the purchasers sent by the slave owners, if they brought back rare items, their superiors would be happy, and they could get a lot of benefits. For the merchants, after buying from the tribes, they could change places and resell to other slave owners, and they could still make a profit. On the Yanjiao side, the goods they brought were almost all sold. After Xiao Xian took out the crystal, more and more people gathered around, and they spontaneously protected him. Every year, there were many thieves who took advantage of the chaos to steal things, and they had to keep their eyes open. This time, Xiao Xian brought a total of 10 crystals, and now he only took out one. At this time, the weather was already cold, and many people were wearing large cloak-like animal skins. It was easy to check if the crystal was really glowing, and they just had to cover it with their own coats. But don't even think about stealing. There were so many eyes around, and as long as they saw the slightest sign, they wouldn't be able to take back their claws. One by one, people squeezed over with large animal skins that completely covered the light, and covered the crystal in Xiao Xian's hand with their large animal skins. Their eyes moved closer to look. In the dim field of vision, the small crystal emitted a clear light. Holding it, they could easily see the words in the dark. Without waiting for them to look, Xiao Xian had already taken back his hand and showed it to the next person. After looking at about 50 people, Xiao Xian put away the crystal and returned to his original position. He said to the crowd, "What do you think? Are you satisfied?" Some nodded, while others remained silent. However, all of them stared at Xiao Xian with fiery eyes, waiting for him to continue. Xiao Xian didn't say anything. Duo Kong took over the mission, but he didn't tell the whole truth. He only said that they found this crystal when they were hunting fearsome beasts. They dug it out from the bottom of a river that was connected to the sea. This wasn't a lie. If that river had water, it would be bigger than the one in front of the tribe. It could be considered a big river, right? It was said that the river would flow to another, bigger river, and then the bigger river would flow into the sea. This was not wrong. As for the total number of crystals, Duo Kong only said that there were 5. This was decided by Xiao Xian, Duo Kong, and the others last night. Unlike Xiao Xian, the people who often hung around here were no strangers to Duo Kong. Therefore, they believed that Duo Kong wasn't lying. At least, he wouldn't lie completely. While Duo Kong was introducing the glowing crystals to everyone, Black Bear, who had been away for 3 days, was sitting in a stone house with a large yard in the city. He was holding a large ceramic bowl and gulping down meat soup. There was a large piece of barbecued meat on a plate next to him, which he finished in 2 or 3 bites. While Black Bear was eating, a big man hurriedly pushed open the door and came in. "Boss, the tribesmen have something again," the man shouted as he ran. Every year when the tribesmen came, they would bring some rare things. Although Black Bear had left, he still sent people to keep an eye on them. "Did something come out over there?" Black Bear wiped his mouth, put down the bowl, and asked. The Yanjiao people brought out a glowing stone. "That stone really glows." "Really, I saw it with my own eyes." The big man was afraid that Black Bear wouldn't believe him, so he quickly assured him. "Yanjiao people again?" Black Bear muttered. He put on his coat, called his men, and strode over. On the other side of the chaotic trading ground, Duo Kong had already explained the rules of the trade. They had also discussed it beforehand. They would use the auction mode, and 5 crystals would be auctioned together. This kind of crystal would definitely attract more attention. If they split the auction, the longer it dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for them. They might be able to get more benefits, but the risk was too great. It was better to end this quickly and leave as soon as possible. Duo Kong had already discussed it with the Taiha people. In order to let the Taiha people pack up early, Duo Kong had also given them some grains. Duo Kong took out a bronze sword that was as long as an arm. They had all been trading for a long time, so they could tell the value of this sword at a glance. Duo Kong used this as the starting price and let the others start bidding. 1 sword and a bag of grains. 2 swords. 2 swords and 5 animal skins. What, you don't want animal skins? Then let's have the grains. I promise they were just harvested this year. 2 swords and 10 bags of grains. 3 swords. Hearing the atmosphere getting hotter and hotter, and the bids getting higher and higher, Duo Kang's heart was blooming with joy. Boss, should we also fight for it? The people beside Black Bear were anxious. That kind of crystal, even if it was 5 bronze swords, it was still worth it. Once they reached the royal city, they just needed to resell and they could get even more. Black Bear's gaze swept over Xiao Xian and Duo Kong. He was about to call out a price when he heard an arrogant voice shout, "A bronze cauldron." Just as everyone was shouting with the unit of measurement that Duo Kong had given, cauldron suddenly appeared in the midst of all the swords. It was very abrupt, like a group of pigs that suddenly screamed like a chicken being slaughtered. Whoosh, a path was forcibly broken through the crowd. 4 tall men with strong muscles opened the way in front, followed by a young man wearing a silver-gray animal skin coat. There were other people around him, and the most conspicuous one was the person standing next to him, carrying a heavy object. Every step he took left a clear footprint on the ground, and his bulging meridians pulsed like dragons, as if he was withstanding an enormous pressure. On his back, there was a heavy object wrapped in cloth. A cauldron? Everyone only felt the ground under their feet shaking with the other party's footsteps. Bang! The heavy cauldron was put down not far from Xiao Xian and Duo Kong. When it landed, it made a muffled sound with metal trembling. The people who heard it felt as if their hearts were shaken to their throats. That is, someone guessed the identity of the young man. To be able to appear in such an arrogant manner, it was naturally a slave owner in Amba City, and his status was not low. The young man who walked slowly raised his hand and swept the non-existent dust on his animal skin coat. In a tone of charity, he said to Xiao Xian and Duo Kong, "A copper cauldron. Don't you tribesmen like copper? I'll give you a cauldron, enough for you to make a lot of swords." Duo Kong almost spat out a mouthful of saliva. Listening to this tone, people who didn't know would really think that they could take advantage of it. How could a copper cauldron be the same as a cast sword? Do you really think that a copper cauldron can be easily made into another thing? Do you think we're easy to fool? When the other party pulled down the cloth, revealing the copper cauldron that reflected the dazzling light, many people present exclaimed. Looking at it this way, this cauldron was really good. Hey, that's not right. Why are the 3 legs of this cauldron not the same length? The triangular copper cauldron's 3 legs were too long and one was twisted. It was not stable on the ground, and the pattern on the copper cauldron looked blurry. Even part of the circular cauldron's body was sunken in. The slave owners here valued the cauldron very much. They used it as a ceremonial object, and certainly would not tolerate such a failure in their own homes. Now, this show-off actually took out an inferior product to bully people? What, did he think that he was giving charity to beggars and directly throwing trash? Yanjiao people didn't like slave owners. If you talked to them about strength, they would talk to you about class. If you talked to them about class, they would talk to you about class. They would never talk about the same topic. So the Yanjiao people didn't like slave owners who thought they were great. But the slave owners did have a lot of good things in their hands. There was a lot of technology and knowledge that they needed to learn. They admitted this and paid some price to learn and understand it. But it didn't mean that they were afraid of the slave owners. And when the slave owners looked at the Yanjiao people, they felt that the Yanjiao people were a group of troublemakers. They didn't listen to reason or force, and they were too damn stubborn. Unfortunately, this young master obviously didn't understand the style of the Yanjiao people. No exchange. We don't want the cauldron. We only want the swords and axes that have already been forged, Duo Kong said. He didn't expect to be rejected. The young man frowned and wasn't satisfied with Duo Kang's answer. You don't want it? We don't want the cauldron, Duo Kong confirmed again. The young man smiled, but there wasn't much of a smile in his eyes. Instead, there was a flash of darkness. You must have it. As the young man's last word fell, the person who had just put down the cauldron bent his arms and rushed forward. His arms, which seemed to have accumulated all his strength, were like ignited cannons. He pushed the cauldron on the ground towards Xiao Xian and Duo Kong. The cauldron, which was pushed up at high speed, flashed like a golden light. It left the ground and brought with it a biting cold wind and the chill of metal. It went straight for Xiao Xian, who was holding the crystal. Black Bear thought that Duo Kong would intervene. After all, in this kind of situation, usually the one who intervened was the leader of the group. They represented the entire tribe. Their opinion was the decision of the entire group. Fight or compromise? The onlookers thought to themselves. But to everyone's surprise, Duo Kong, who was standing closest to Xiao Xian, didn't make a move. He still stood in the same spot. Xiao Xian, who was facing the cauldron, lowered his waist and bent his knees. His whole body was like a mountain that was rooted to the ground. He raised one arm and pressed it against the cauldron. He actually chose to take it head-on. Bang! With the reverberation of heavy metal, it was as if a huge drum had suddenly been struck, producing a deafening sound wave. Even the golden light reflected by the three-legged cauldron seemed to have been completely dispersed in that instant. The moment the sound rang out, everyone in the tribe's trading area was shocked. What happened? This was what those who didn't see what happened were thinking. What happened? This was the person who saw the whole thing but couldn't react. Black Bear's eyelids kept twitching. That kid actually took it head-on with one hand. Bang! There was another sound. This time, it was different from the explosion of sound waves. This time, it was the sound of a heavy object falling to the ground. The body of the cauldron, which was almost as tall as a person, fell to the ground again. The surrounding soil and stones were shaken away. The dust was blown away by the wind, but the cauldron didn't move forward an inch. It stopped in front of Xiao Xian. Chapter 394. Because of the protection of his subordinates and several slaves, and Ping, who sat there with a proud posture, did not suffer much damage from the momentum. Only the sound just now hurt his ears. Pushing aside the people in front of him, and Ping frowned and looked at the person standing there like a mountain. He looked at the totem pattern on the other's body and seemed to have seen it before, but he couldn't remember. And Ping cursed his bad luck. Today was really unlucky. He went to check the goods early in the morning and brought back the pre-ordered cauldron. Who knew that there would be a mistake in the cauldron casting? In a fit of anger, he let the slaves around him carry the cauldron away, intending to find someone else to cast the cauldron. There were so many people in the Yin family, why let an outsider cast the cauldron? What's more, it was cheaper to cast the cauldron himself. However, when he came out of the cauldron casting, he heard someone say that there were treasures in the free trade zone, so he brought people over. He wanted to exchange a useless cauldron for those treasures. Not only could he get rid of the failed product, but he could also show his generosity. If the other party did not give him face, he would use force. Who would have thought that such a situation would occur? What were the people around him saying, Yinjiao tribe? The name was a bit familiar. Meeting that pair of eyes, and Ping actually felt a sense of fear. And Ping had no choice but to look elsewhere, but his neck seemed to be particularly stiff when he turned around. Xiao Xian, who had been sitting there, had stood up because of the cauldron. At this time, the hand that blocked the cauldron was still on the body of the cauldron. His feet were apart, his knees were propped up, and his body was slightly crouched. He stood there steadily, giving people the feeling that a sleeping beast had opened its eyes after being provoked. Savage like a beast, this was the evaluation of the people of Amba City who lived in remote places. The Yanjiao tribe in front of him was also the same in Ping's heart. And in Ping's eyes, the moment this savage beast woke up, a powerful aura erupted from its body. That was not the power that an ordinary, savage beast could produce. That ferocious aura that rampaged just now was something that no one present could ignore, no matter how slow they were. Tricky. That was in Ping's thought at the moment. After the silence, there was a burst of noise. They thought that the person in charge here was Duo Kong. Even if it wasn't Duo Kong, it would be Guang Yi. They didn't expect it to be the young man who took out the gem. Who is that person? Are all the young people in Yanjiao so powerful? Hee, look at that city guy's expression. I wonder if the two sides will really start fighting. It's good to fight. We can take advantage of the opportunity to pick up some good stuff. Not only Black Bear, but even the others who were thinking about how to pick up the scraps secretly felt that this was a good slap in the face. Did they really think that their tribesmen's eyelids were shallow and that they could be dealt with by a little broken thing? Although the onlookers retreated a little further, as if they wanted to stay away from the battlefield, they didn't really leave. They didn't mind watching a show. Moreover, for most of the tribesmen here, they usually gave face to the people surnamed in Amba City, but they weren't really afraid of them. Naturally, they were happy to see the Yanjiao people humiliate the Ans. Anyway, this matter didn't involve them. On the other side, seeing his subordinates on the ground, and Ping's expression twisted. This was a provocation. A provocation to the authority of Amba City. Unable to sit still any longer, and Ping suddenly stood up and waved his hand. Beat them. After a pause, he added, get those glowing stones back for me. After receiving the order, several figures around Ping rushed straight to Xiao Xian. But this time, Xiao Xian didn't move. When the other side rushed over, several figures also rushed out from his side and behind him. Duo Kong and Guang Yi rushed to the front. Did they think they were dead? If they all relied on Xiao Xian to fight alone, they would be scolded by the shaman and chief when they returned. There was the sound of metal clashing, as well as the collision of bones and muscles. Fists and feet collided, and with the sound of bones breaking, a figure smashed to the ground. Puff 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 puff, another sound of people falling to the ground rang out one after another. And Ping's twisted face became even more ferocious with these sounds, but he didn't have the guts to fight personally. After smashing the last person who rushed out to the ground, Duo Kong and the others returned to their own camp and stood around Xiao Xian. Duo Kong took out an axe that he had exchanged not long ago and threw it to Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian caught the axe and turned the handle between his fingers. Then he held the handle firmly in his palm and looked at Ping and the others not far away. Without the paint, the flame-like totemic patterns on their bodies were fully displayed. If there was only one beast that had just woken up from a deep slumber, now there was a group of beasts. The aura of 100 people was almost twisted together like a burning axe, ready to break through all obstacles. Strong, fearless. Even the bystanders who had retreated could feel the pressure clearly. You have your untouchable status, I have my overbearing and unreasonable ways. Don't try to reason with me. In the free trade area, the first person to break the rules has no right to talk about reason. No matter what, the Yanjiao people's bottom line was always very clear. You want something? Alright, just do as we say. Take out as much as you need, not a single one less. Otherwise, we'll beat you up. There was a sense of anxiety in the air. Even the onlookers didn't dare to make a noise. At this time, a clear voice suddenly came from outside the crowd. What's going on? As the voice fell, the crowd parted to form a path. Unlike Ping, the person who appeared at this time wasn't so ostentatious, but he was more eye-catching. Many of the tribesmen in the trading area knew him. Ping gave people a sense of vanity, but the person who appeared at this time had a noble aura. This was a member of the main bloodline of City. Hearing the voice, Ping's face suddenly changed. He put away his other expressions, and his eyes were filled with panic and fear. But thinking about it, what did he do wrong? How could the tribesmen not be willing to take advantage of him? Thinking of this, Ping quickly walked towards that person. Seeing the other person's gaze, Ping shrank his neck and continued to complain. The first thing he said was, "Those barbarians, Not only the Yanjiao people, but also many of the tribesmen who were watching the show, raised their eyebrows. Barbarians? At least I abide by the basic rules here. What about you guys? Do you think I won't show you how barbaric I am? And Yen stood there quietly, listening to Ping's complaint. His expression didn't change, and he didn't interrupt. Instead, he stretched out his palm. It didn't seem to have any offensive power, but when it hit Ping's body, Ping directly spat out a mouthful of blood and flew out. The crowd watching the show hurriedly made way for Ping to fall directly to the ground. If it weren't for Yen here, they would have stepped on him a few more times. Yen looked down on what Ping did. He only felt that how could City raise such an idiot? Fortunately, they were in charge of this branch. As for the other branches Ping belonged to, those who could raise idiots were naturally a bunch of idiots and trash. Yen looked down on them even more. Yen knew that the tribesmen in the trading area were angry, so he simply used Ping to appease the tribesmen in the trading area. Looking at the people around him, sure enough, after seeing Ping get beaten, the anger on their faces faded a lot. Looking around with a faint smile, Yen said in a clear voice, "My city also follows the rules. Since we provide a place for everyone to trade, naturally we will abide by these rules." After he finished speaking, he looked at Xiao Xian and the others. He waved his hand to have people bring over a large box. Yen said, "That crystal stone, I will pay 5 swords and 5 bags of grains. Is there anyone else who wants to increase the price?" The surroundings were quiet. Even if they weren't convinced, after thinking about it, they still gave up. First of all, they really couldn't afford the price City offered. Second of all, they didn't want to compete with the young master of City. This young master still followed the rules, so they also gave him face. Black Bear's eyes flashed with ridicule when no one was paying attention. Rules? Rules my ass. Chapter 395. Duo Kong looked at Xiao Xian, and when he saw Xiao Xian nod, he went over to count. Xiao Xian also took out the 5 crystals. "In that case, these things are naturally yours." Yen smiled, and the anxious atmosphere from before dissipated. Letting people take the crystals away, Yen also let people drag the cauldron that was standing crookedly on the ground. "This cauldron is a gift to you as an apology." Although the cauldron was a failure, it was still bronze after all. If it was not satisfactory as a weapon, it could be used to make other things. Even Black Bear felt that this gift was good. Duo Kong naturally felt that this gift was very cost-effective, but it also depended on Xiao Xian's thoughts. Young people were, after all, impetuous. Sometimes, in order to fight, it was understandable that they did not want the benefits in their hands. Unexpectedly, Xiao Xian smiled and did not refuse. "Thank you." After the two sides completed the transaction, Yen left with his people, and the trading point returned to its previous state. However, those who wanted to take advantage of the situation were quite disappointed. They regretted that they did not fight. The people of the Yanjiao tribe packed up their things and left amidst the discussion of the people around them. The people of the Taiha tribe also left. This was something they had arranged long ago. On the other side, the people around Black Bear watched the Yanjiao people leave. They raised their thick fingers and pointed in the direction the Yanjiao people left. "Boss, should we follow them?" "Of course. I don't believe that's all they have." Black Bear grinned. The people of the Yanjiao and Taiha skillfully left Amba City, took care of a group of followers, and then quickly left along the road they came from. Originally, Duo Kong planned to go another way. This was what they did every time. When they came, they would take one road, and when they went back, they would take another road. It was safer this way. However, Xiao Xian suggested that they go along the original road for a while, and then change. Anyway, the two roads were not far from each other at the beginning, so it was not too late to change. There wasn't much cover around this section of the road, so if there was anyone, they would be able to discover it in advance. At first, the people from Taiha were against Xiao Xian's decision, but fortunately, they would still change their route when the time came. After thinking about it, they reluctantly accepted it. However, it was natural for them to have their own opinions, so they didn't give him any face. The large cauldron had already been wrapped in a green-gray cloth, so it wasn't as conspicuous as before. The Yanjiao people were strong, so it wasn't that strenuous for them to carry it. After a while, they would switch to another person to carry it one by one, so it wouldn't take too much time. The journey back was much more dangerous. There were quite a few robberies. Previously, when they saw the Yanjiao people picking up good stuff, there were already quite a few groups who wanted to rob them. This time, no one held back. Those who needed to be killed were killed. A slight sound was heard. More robbers. Everyone was on high alert. Xiao Xian smiled when he saw the approaching figure. "They're finally here," Xiao Xian said. "You knew we were coming?" Black Bear asked doubtfully. "I guessed." Xiao Xian didn't say anything else. He had only noticed Black Bear's gaze when he was leaving, and based on other people's evaluation of Black Bear, he had made a final guess. That was why he had everyone follow the original path. The danger level of this journey was not high, and if no one came after this journey, they would switch to another path. Black Bear's thick eyebrows twitched, then he laughed loudly. "You Yanjiao people are really interesting." If they could guess that he was coming, then they could definitely guess something else. The Yanjiao people were smarter than he thought. Seeing that it was Black Bear, the others relaxed slightly. Duo Kong walked up and asked, "Could it be that you still want to trade with us?" They had left in a hurry, so they still had some things that they hadn't sold. There were even more people from Taiha left. Hearing this, they looked at Black Bear expectantly. "That's right," Black Bear said in a rough voice. "I know you still have those glowing crystals. I'll trade with you at the same price as in yen. How about that?" Seeing Xiao Xian nod, Duo Kong was happy. When he heard that Black Bear would buy all of their remaining goods, Duo Kang's eyes narrowed into slits. The people from Taiha were no longer angry. In fact, they were quite grateful for Xiao Xian's decision. Now that they had sold all of their goods, it would be easier for them to go back. After letting his men complete the trade, Black Bear asked Xiao Xian about the use of the glowing crystals. After Xiao Xian finished, Black Bear touched the thick leather hat on his head, took out a piece of bone engraved with a bear pattern, and handed it to Xiao Xian. "If you have such goods in the future, you can come to us directly. I'll still eat the animal skin and other goods. Oh, and that stone carving of yours, if you have it, I also want it. It's best if it's a giant bear, but if there's no giant bear, other things are fine too." Black Bear also mentioned their base in Amba City. Coupled with the bone plate, if Black Bear wasn't in Amba City, they could still trade as usual. The Yanjiao people didn't have to worry about being cheated. Cooperation. The Taiha people were a little surprised. Black Bear's reputation was indeed good, but he didn't always have a fixed partner. They had trading forces everywhere, so they didn't have to be afraid of the people of Amba City. Even if they were enemies of Amba City, they would still trade with them, not to mention the Yanjiao people who only had a little friction with them. But even so, the Taiha people were still surprised that Black Bear would find Yanjiao people to cooperate. Could it be that he really took a fancy to Yanjiao's crystals? After the trade was completed, Black Bear added, "Don't believe the people of Amba City, especially when they mention rules. Because in the hearts of the Amba people of the 6 tribes, what they say is the rules." The people of Amba City never had fixed rules. In the past, when the Yanjiao people went to Amba City to trade, it wasn't conspicuous, and there weren't many things that they really valued. But this time was different. The Yanjiao people not only beat the people of Amba City, but also took out things that would cause trouble. "Thank you for telling us," Xiao Xian thanked him. "Even if I didn't tell you, you would still be on guard." Black Bear's eyes swept over a large wooden box next to Xiao Xian. "Can I know what's inside?" Just now, when Xiao Xian moved the box, he heard a little sound. It wasn't the sound of metal, but more like the sound of stones colliding. Could it be that there was still something good that hadn't been taken out? As a businessman, sometimes his curiosity was still very strong. Otherwise, how could he smell a business opportunity? Those are not things for trade. Xiao Xian refused. With that said, Black Bear was even more curious. He pestered Xiao Xian for a while, promised some other benefits, and took out some small bronze objects as gifts. Only then did he let Xiao Xian open the box. When he saw the things inside, Black Bear was stunned for a moment, then burst out laughing. Then, in a good mood, he called his men to leave. The people of the Taiha tribe, because of their angle, did not see what was in Xiao Xian's box. What was inside was not the things that Xiao Xian exchanged with the crystal stones. Naturally, it was something else. What was it? Ignoring the curious gazes of the people of the Taiha tribe, Xiao Xian packed up his things and planned to set off again. The person he was waiting for had arrived, so it was time to change his route. With Black Bear as a partner, the Yanjiao people would not have to worry about being rejected by the people of Amba City when they brought things to trade. After taking 2 steps, Xiao Xian stopped again. He saw that the cloth wrapped around the cauldron had been torn. Guang Yi was letting people wrap it with other cloth. Although this was a failed cauldron, the material and parts of the cauldron were still very exquisite. The body of the cauldron was heavy and thick, and the engravings and words on it were full of an ancient and fierce sense of mystery. At that time, when Yen proposed to give the cauldron as a gift to the Yanjiao people as an apology, the others felt that because the cauldron was a bronze object, it could be recast into other objects or exchanged for more benefits, so the Yanjiao people accepted the gift. But Xiao Xian agreed to accept the cauldron not entirely because of this. The main reason was that he was very interested in the engravings and words on the cauldron. The people of the Great 6 Cities used the cauldron as a ceremonial object. The cauldron symbolized power. Whether it was a major celebration or a reward for people, many times they would record some more special things on the cauldron, representing different meanings. And Xiao Xian was interested in this. Yes, most of the people here were literate, but the extent of their knowledge was very limited. The words they were familiar with were the words commonly used in daily transactions. As for the more complicated words, there were fewer people who understood them. Some of the more complicated sentences were extremely simple but profound, just like the conclusion used by the tribe in the past. They were even more confusing, so there were even fewer people who cared about them. Many people made their own weapons, but never added words on it. At most, they added their tribe's totem or name, and nothing else. They felt that it was too troublesome, and were not as particular as the people of the Great 6 Cities. Not only did they add words, but they also drew a lot of other patterns that were superfluous to them. Just like this cauldron, although they knew that there were words on the cauldron, they only felt that it was for decorative purposes and could not understand it. They were also not interested in these things, so naturally they would not look at it. When the cauldron was wrapped up again, Xiao Xian's gaze moved away from it. Let's change our route. Duo Kong called the rest of the people who were still resting, and the group set off again. On the other side, Black Bear led his people away. There were also people who tried to rob them, but they were all dealt with quickly. Boss, you saw that kid from the Yanjiao tribe in the box. What was in it? One of the people in Black Bear's team pulled a leaf from a nearby tree, wiped the blood on his sword, and asked. Something interesting, Black Bear replied. What could make you laugh like that? Everyone was puzzled. How many of the people Yen sent out do you think will come back? Black Bear asked. They had a wide network of people in city, so they were naturally aware of Yan's movements. Don't be fooled by Yan's righteous appearance in front of others. He kept talking about the rules, but in reality, he was ruthless. As soon as the Yanjiao people set off, he sent people to chase after them. He also knew that the Yanjiao people used to take a different route back, so he sent people to chase them in that direction. He did not expect that the Yanjiao people would go back the way they came. However, they would definitely meet the Yanjiao people later on. Speaking of which, neither route was safe. On one side, there were people from other tribes waiting to ambush them, and on the other, there was Nyan's people chasing after them. If it was before, Black Bear might have sympathized with the Yanjiao people, but now, Black Bear felt that the other side might be the unlucky one. The others in the group were still discussing Black Bear's words. Seeing Black Bear's gloating face, they could not help but ask, "Boss, how many of Nyan's people do you think will come back? Even if they fail, at least half of them will come back, right?" "Half? Hey, 10 or 20 is more like it. How is that possible?" The others did not believe it. "Is it a trap? That's impossible." It was not that they looked down on the Yanjiao people, but they knew that most tribesmen still cherished weapons. Even if they set up an ambush, they would choose wood, rope, and so on. If that was not enough, they would use all kinds of medicine. As for metal, they were pitifully few, because they were reluctant to use it. The lethality of wood compared to metal was, of course, much smaller. Bone was very restrictive and inconvenient to use, so in the use of many traps, many tribesmen may not be able to compare to the people of the 6 great cities. Not everyone was as generous as the slave masters of the 6 great cities. In this world, there are not only wood and metal. Black Bear sighed. Stone tools, this thing that had almost disappeared from the stage of history, he saw in the Yanjiao people. Moreover, they were very meticulously made, as if the maker had already thought about how to use those stone tools. Like a spider perched in a hidden corner, when it pulled out the first silk, it knew what kind of web it was going to weave. Chapter 396. When Xiao Xian was in the free trade area, before he took out the crystal stones, he would spend his free time every night polishing stone tools. Because the animal skins sold quickly, many of the Yanjiao people were idle for the next few days. Xiao Xian asked them to find stones, and then choose the stones they were satisfied with and polish them into the required stone tools. Xiao Xian learned from Duo Kong and the others what kind of terrain the road back was, how high the mountains were, how much vegetation was distributed, how many species of animals and plants there were, and so on. Therefore, when he was polishing the stone tools, he had already thought about what kind of traps and nooses to set up. Even if there were no crystal stones, according to Duo Kang's past experience, they would still encounter a lot of robbers. In the free trade area of Amba City, many people could talk and laugh with you one day, but the next day they could ambush you in the mountains and kill you. When going out to trade, it was necessary to be vigilant. Therefore, Xiao Xian made these stone tools to prevent too many people from chasing after them. Stone tools were not like gold tools. As long as there were no special requirements, the requirements for stone were not very high. Usable stone materials were everywhere in the mountains and forests, unlike gold tools, which were not distressed to waste. For many tribesmen, a small dagger could be precious. Of course, it was impossible to throw out gold tools like darts or hidden weapons. If they threw them away and couldn't get them back, they would definitely be distressed. Obviously, the people sent out by Yen to chase after them had the same idea. They inquired about the Yanjiao people's previous style of conduct and inquired about their past deeds, but they had never heard that they would use large-scale traps and hidden weapons on their way back, so they didn't care about chasing after them. At first, because the Yanjiao people did not follow the original route, they didn't see any figures. Later, when they saw footprints and other traces of walking, they excitedly continued to chase until they heard the slight sound of a string bouncing. It was as if a bird had flown up from a tree, and then they were faced with dense wooden thorns. It was really too sudden. Even if they reacted quickly, they couldn't completely avoid the sudden attack of the wooden thorns. One of the members of the team waved the sword in his hand, and the sword's shadows formed a shield, blocking the wooden thorns that were shot at him. At the same time, he kicked the ground with the tip of his foot and quickly bounced away, trying to avoid these wooden thorns. However, when he landed again, he stepped on something. He felt as if there was a thin rope suddenly pulled out from under his feet, and then there were wooden thorns coming at him from the side. In their eyes, these were all little tricks made of wood and flowers. But, after just 2 steps, they didn't know who stepped on something, but there was a short sound of rattling vines. Everyone's nerves suddenly tightened, and they clenched the weapons in their hands. The leader grabbed a bronze shield from one of the team members and vigilantly looked in the direction of the sound. However, they did not receive a new wave of wooden spikes. Instead, they saw a few strange wooden objects that resembled crescent moons fly out. Furthermore, they did not fly towards them. Instead, they flew in a direction far away from them. The flying wooden objects accurately passed through the gaps between the branches in the forest. They weren't blocked by the thick trunks and dense branches. Instead, they rushed out of the cover of the leaves and flew in an arc into the distance. Bang bang bang! They didn't know what the flying wooden objects hit, but when they heard the sound, the pursuers' hearts jumped and their nerves tightened again. After the wooden objects hit something, they flew in other directions. Then, some dense whooshing sounds came. Realizing what it was, the leader shouted, "It's the leaf-piercing bee. Dodge!" Unlike the buzzing sound made by other mountain bees, the flying sound of the leaf-piercing bee was very special. It was similar to the whooshing sound of an arrow passing through. They were 2 to 3 times larger than ordinary bees and flew very fast. Because of the cone-shaped hard armor in front of their heads, they could easily pass through the leaves. Being stung by them, the consequences were much worse than the wooden thorns. "There's actually a leaf-piercing bee's hive around here," the leader said angrily. The leaf-piercing bee generally didn't take the initiative to attack, but once it got angry, it was very aggressive. Moreover, the leaf-piercing bee's hive was very large. Almost every hive in the forest occupied a whole tree, so the number of bees was naturally large. Except for those beasts with thick skin who liked to steal honey and were talented, other beasts in the forest kept a respectful distance from the leaf-piercing bee's hive. And these pursuers obviously didn't expect that the Yanjiao people would take the path of the leaf-piercing bee. The wooden objects that flew out just now were targeted at the leaf-piercing bee's hive. The hive was attacked, and the leaf-piercing bees were angry. Just by listening to the sound of the leaves being passed through, one could know the mood of the leaf-piercing bee at this time. As soon as they heard that it was the leaf-piercing bee, the others in the team panicked and quickly spread out to distract the attention of the leaf-piercing bees. If those leaf-piercing bees went after the others, they could also escape this disaster. However, even if they spread out, there were always leaf-piercing bees chasing after them. It was the light yellow powder with a slightly sweet smell. Thinking of the reason, the leader was angry and aggrieved. If it was a head-on fight, then it was nothing. He was annoyed that the tribesmen's little tricks could kill people. Many of those leaf-piercing bees were slapped to the ground with a sword, but the more it was like this, the angrier the leaf-piercing bees were. The whooshing sound in the forest continued. A man touched the noose because he was trying to avoid the wasps and was hung up by his feet. Before he could use his sword to cut the vines, he was clamped by 2 large clamps with sharp stone awls on both sides, like the mouth of a giant beast. He didn't even have the chance to scream. In an instant, the blood spread. Similar situations happened everywhere else. Some were tied up, some fell into the potholes, and then what greeted them was the real killing move. The whooshing sound of the leaf-piercing bees, the dense whooshing sound like rain, and the panicked screams of the pursuers mixed together in the forest. At the foot of the mountain, 2 groups of people were hurrying on. It was the Yanjiao and the Taiha tribe. They could hear a little of the movement on the mountain. Not only the Yanjiao people, but the Taiha tribe people also glanced at Xiao Xian from time to time. They didn't know what Xiao Xian had done. After changing paths, Xiao Xian told them to hurry on with all their might, ignoring the traces left on the ground. Then Xiao Xian brought a few people to cover their backs. Before leaving, he asked the Taiha tribe people for some medicine. Because it was for the safety of the 2 teams, the Taiha tribe people didn't hide anything. They gave Xiao Xian everything he asked for. The powder that attracted the leaf-piercing bees was made by the Taiha people. They dared to walk near the leaf-piercing bee's nest because the Taiha people had a way to avoid the leaf-piercing bees. The team waited for a while at the foot of the mountain. Xiao Xian came back with people, but the expressions on the faces of the people who came back were very strange. Some were at a loss, but some were looking forward to it. Duo Kong was one of them. He originally thought that Xiao Xian brought them to block the pursuers, but he didn't expect that when they reached the mountainside, Xiao Xian told them to stop and then assign tasks. They were to break wood thorns, cut wood, find vines, and then Xiao Xian carried his wooden box and continued to walk up the mountain with those things, starting to arrange them. Xiao Xian said that he could block the pursuers, but Duo Kong didn't believe it. Now that he heard the movement on the mountain, it might really be like what Xiao Xian said. Flap flap, a flock of birds flew over the team in the sky. Those birds! The Taiha tribesmen's eyes narrowed as they looked at the sky. Their gazes followed the birds, and they looked at the mountain behind them that was constantly moving. Those birds were scavenger birds. They could smell blood from far away and then follow the smell to find food. When hunting in the forest, they would also judge what was happening based on the movements of the scavenger birds. Now, the place where the scavenger birds were flying was the place where the Yanjiao people had set up the trap. "Are those people all dead?" someone in the team asked Xiao Xian. "It's not that easy," Xiao Xian replied, "but after a few more times, there shouldn't be many left." A few more times, the Yanjiao people and the Taiha people looked up at Xiao Xian at the same time, then looked away and hurried on in silence. Chapter 397. The team didn't cover their tracks. Even if they did, they wouldn't be able to cover them completely, so they didn't bother. There were a few hundred people carrying goods and cauldrons. It was impossible for them to not leave a trace in the forest. After a while, Xiao Xian would set up some more traps. The Taiha people would also help. Their drugs would make Xiao Xian's traps even more pleasurable. As long as the people behind them continued to follow their footsteps, they could continue to enjoy themselves. If they could use skills to deal with the enemy, why would they need to use brute force? The Yanjiao and Taiha people were happy to see this. They didn't need to waste time and manpower to deal with the pursuers. They only needed to be on guard against the people who had been lying in ambush in the forest. This greatly reduced the pressure on them. 2 days later, the number of ambushes had decreased. They didn't see a single person after half a day. Duo Kong relaxed. It was finally over. From now on, they only needed to be on guard against the beasts in the mountains. Because of Xiao Xian's traps, the people behind them didn't catch up. Occasionally, they would see a flock of scavenger birds chirping as they flew overhead. Along the way, they saw Xiao Xian making stone tools. During the break, the people in the team were still in the mood to ask Xiao Xian how to use and make stone tools. If they were ever trapped in the forest and didn't have any other weapons, they could make stone tools to save themselves. Hearing Xiao Xian say that because their team had very few gold tools, they basically used stone tools. If it was before, everyone would have imagined a powerful image of a person holding a huge rock to smash a beast. However, after experiencing the events of the past 2 days, everyone realized that stone tools could also play a big role. It was not just the skill of smashing rocks. When they didn't have any metal tools, the brothers in the other team used all kinds of stone tools to deal with the beasts in the mountains. The brothers in the other team were really fierce. If there was a chance, they really wanted to meet them and have an in-depth discussion. As for the stones Xiao Xian mentioned, many people were confused. From their point of view, all stones looked the same. Guang Yi, who was face-blind, was the fastest learner in distinguishing stones. When the people of Yanjiao and Taiha returned to their tribes, on the other side, in Amba City, Yan looked at a dozen people covered in blood and mud standing in front of him. He was so angry that his face turned green. With a flick of his hand, he threw the palm-sized wine cup on the ground. A bunch of trash. The person who was scolded stood there, trembling with fear. He lowered his head and did not say a word. This time, they had indeed lost a lot of people. Encountering those continuous traps was one of them. They were also robbed by other tribesmen and suffered many casualties. Once they were out of Amba City, the other tribesmen put away their smiles. Whatever they could rob, it didn't matter if they were from the 6 tribes of Amba or anyone else. The immediate benefits were the most important. Because of the trap, many of the people in Yen sent out were injured. They were also taken advantage of. He sent out more than 100 people, but in the end, only a dozen came back. How could In Yen not be angry? It was like being pressed by a big stone in the chest. It was so stuffy that he wanted to vomit blood. The Yanjiao people didn't get the remaining crystal stones in their hands, and they didn't even get the bronze cauldron back. Why did In Yen easily give away such a big bronze cauldron as a gift? One was to attract hatred. Giving it away in front of so many people in the free trading area would definitely attract more people's attention to the Yanjiao tribe's trading team. Of course, In Yen was happy to borrow other people's hands to cause trouble for the Yanjiao people. The second reason was to use the bronze cauldron to delay the Yanjiao people's pace. It was definitely inconvenient to carry such a big cauldron in the mountains and forests. It would also leave traces of walking, making it easier to track. But the result was like a loud slap, mercilessly slapping In Yen in the face. Bronze was still very rare to the tribesmen, and the casting process was complicated. Every cauldron, especially those large ones, required a lot of manpower and material resources. Because of its rarity, it had always been exclusive to the slave masters since its creation. Moreover, it was only owned by the leaders of the 6 tribes. Those with lower status in the city did not have the ability to own one at all. Most people could only use pottery cauldrons. Of course, as the descendant of the leader, In Yen had the right to give cauldrons to others, but to give it to the tribesmen? In Yen really didn't think about this. Even if it was a failed casting cauldron, he didn't want to give it to the tribesmen directly. He only wanted to use it as a chess piece. But he didn't expect that this chess piece would be snatched away. How could he expect the tribesmen to spit out something that was taken back? Bang! Probably because he felt that the bronze wine cup wasn't enough to vent his anger, In Yen smashed an exquisitely made ceramic cup with an extremely thin body. Get out! Seeing these people standing in front of him, In Yen was angry. If it weren't for the fact that he still needed these people after losing so many people, he would have already dragged these wastes out and beheaded them. The next time the Yanjiao people came to Amba City's free trade area, he would definitely teach them a lesson. Unfortunately, what In Yen didn't know was that the Yanjiao people had already made a deal with Black Bear and didn't need to run to the free trade area. By the time the Yanjiao and Taiha teams returned to the tribe, the weather in the mountain forest had obviously turned cold. Standing at a high place, they could see the yellowed leaves everywhere in the mountain forest. It wouldn't be long before those leaves completely fell, and at that time, winter would come. After going out to trade, the Taiha tribe people learned one thing: it was better not to provoke Yanjiao's little elder. He could fight head-on. Playing dirty? He could still do it. Especially the few people who fought Xiao Xian before. They were glad that Xiao Xian didn't trap them at that time. Otherwise, they would have been tortured to death or angered to death. After parting with the Taiha people, Duo Kong led the team back to the tribe with a smile on his face. The big cauldron that reflected the golden light was also carried by Duo Kong. At this time, there was no need to hide it. He lifted the cloth to reveal the body of the cauldron, which was quite eye-catching. Looking at Duo Kong, who couldn't wait to jump up and show off with the cauldron, Guangyi pursed his lips and called for the others to follow. Walking through the forest, they saw the river outside the tribe. On the other side of the river, Chief Xing Luo led the tribe people and stood there to welcome the trading team. The big cauldron Duo Kong carried almost blinded the eyes of the people who came to welcome them. Xing Luo's first reaction when he saw the big cauldron was disbelief. He closed his eyes and opened them again. Duo Kong was still carrying the shining cauldron with a grin on his face. If they didn't exchange for something useful, how could they exchange for a big cauldron? And it was a flat one. If they used it to cook, it wouldn't even be as good as the big stone pot left by their ancestors. Seeing that the cauldron was unstable, Xing Luo's expression darkened. What's going on? Xing Luo went forward to ask. If Duo Kong had exchanged for this cauldron with weapons, he would immediately call for a tribal meeting and remove Duo Kong from his position as chief. Duo Kong put down the cauldron and shook his arms to loosen his muscles. Then he smiled and said, "You mean this cauldron? It's Xiao Xian's." When he heard that it was Xiao Xian's, Jing Luo's expression stiffened. His questioning expression softened. He was about to reprimand Duo Kong for not advising Xiao Xian to exchange for the cauldron when Duo Kong briefly explained the situation. After hearing this, Jing Luo put away his dissatisfaction and stroked his beard. He smiled and said, "Since it's a gift, just accept it." Who wouldn't accept something that was delivered to their doorstep? As the chief of the tribe, Jing Luo obviously thought of more things. To the slave masters, this cauldron was not something that could be casually given away. He could already guess Yan's expression now. They went for wool and came home shorn. They deserved it. They deserved it for showing off. When he heard that Duo Kong was working with Black Bear, Jing Luo smiled even harder. He said, "Good. Good. Good." Jing Luo, who was in a good mood, called Xiao Xian up the mountain and gave him some linen and silk fabrics. "While you were out, another team from the tribe went to trade with other tribesmen. I have a lot here, take some with you." Although ramie and other textile materials were rough, they were cheap and easy to obtain. Everyone used them more, but silk fabrics were rarely used. The slave masters really liked those glossy and smooth fabrics. After giving Xiao Xian some linen and silk fabrics, Jing Luo asked Xiao Xian about the trade. Duo Kong only gave a brief explanation. He wanted to know more about the details. When he finished, Jing Luo looked at the cauldron he brought back. Cloud pattern flat cauldron. "It should be made by the Xia people," Jing Luo said. Xia people? Xiao Xian didn't know much about this. Yes, it used to be the Xia tribe. The Xia people were good at casting. After the tribe split up, the Xia people used Gongjia as their surname and made a living by casting. Many cauldrons in Amba City were made by them. The Xia people's style is mainly round cauldrons and cloud patterns. In recent years, they have more flat cauldrons. The 6 tribes are now casting cauldrons. Most of them are round cauldrons, followed by square cauldrons, and flat cauldrons are the least common. More than half of the round cauldrons and flat cauldrons are made by the Xia people. Plus, the Xia people like cloud patterns and not beast patterns, so this cauldron should be made by the Xia people. But I don't know why this cauldron failed. Jing Luo looked at the flat body of the cauldron and then at its feet, puzzled. Since he couldn't figure it out, Jing Luo stopped thinking about it. He said to Xiao Xian, "You can decide on this cauldron. You can melt it or keep it for your own soup." Xiao Xian carried the cauldron out of Jing Luo's place. When he returned home, he put the cauldron in his stone crafting room. It was big enough and spacious enough for him to study the patterns on the cauldron. The words on the cauldron were a little cryptic and ancient. If it were anyone else, they probably wouldn't be able to read or understand, but Xiao Xian could still understand some of it. The usage of the language here had more or less changed after 1,000 years. There were some differences in the usage of words and grammar. What Xiao Xian learned from the people in the desert was actually the usage of the language here from 1,000 years ago. It was closer to the ancient method on the cauldron. Xiao Xian wrote all the words on the body of the cauldron on a piece of cloth for later study. But when Xiao Xian finished writing those words and looked at the cauldron standing there crookedly, he felt that the patterns on the body of the cauldron were a little strange. It was like a whirlpool, attracting people's attention. Chapter 398. Many people thought that the decorative patterns on the cups and other objects were purely for the sake of looking good or acting as a symbol. Xiao Xian used to think so too, but the more he came into contact with these things, the more Xiao Xian found that there were many mysterious things in them. Just like the cauldron in front of him. Xiao Xian thought that what was displayed on the cauldron was all about the achievements of a slave owner in Amba City or other heroic deeds, or records of some memorable things. But when he carefully observed it, he found that there were many things that he could not understand. Yes, just these words did contain some of the glorious history of Amba City. Although there were a few words that Xiao Xian could not understand, it did not affect his understanding of those words. They were words of praise for the ancient Amba tribe, as well as a few congratulatory words. If it was just these, it would be fine, but the cloud patterns on the cauldron that seemed to act as decoration or background always gave Xiao Xian a very strange feeling. Many tribes liked this kind of cloud pattern. The Hui tribe that he came into contact with also liked to use cloud patterns. Probably because these vortex-shaped cloud patterns could not only be used as decoration and filling, but also had a sense of complexity and mystery in the structure. They were free and had a variety of styles. This cloud pattern flat-footed cauldron had a more delicate and complex cloud pattern on the upper end. Each cloud pattern vortex rolled towards the center, some like rolling clouds, some like flowing clouds. What was composed of many cloud patterns was not a simple two-sided structure that repeatedly overlapped up and down, but was combined in a more natural way. It was much more complex than the cloud pattern used by the Hui tribe. It was also the most complex but most natural cloud pattern Xiao Xian had ever seen. At first glance, the pattern was quite beautiful. Although it was not as attractive as the larger characters on the body of the cauldron, as long as one saw the cloud pattern, they would be attracted to it. It was an indescribable visual impact. As decorations, their purpose had been achieved, but was that really all? Xiao Xian stared at the patterns on the body of the cauldron for a while. He wanted to copy the complex and dense cloud patterns, but there was no paper around. Using cloth was too extravagant. Xiao Xian got up and went out to find some wide and long leaves. He then painted some paint on the cloud patterns on the body of the cauldron and used the leaves to print the patterns on the leaves. After that, Xiao Xian copied the cloud patterns on a piece of cloth. Not only were there cloud patterns on the body of the cauldron, but there were also cloud patterns on the three flat legs of the cauldron. However, unlike the fine and complicated cloud patterns on the body of the cauldron, the cloud patterns on the flat legs were much thicker and more concise. Xiao Xian also imprinted the cloud patterns on the flat feet one by one and studied them slowly. Zheng Luo said that the cauldron was made by the Xia people. The Xia people liked to use cloud patterns. According to what Xiao Xian knew, cloud patterns were one of the earliest patterns. It seemed that every tribe that used cloud patterns had a very long history. Yanjiao's flame patterns were also created early. However, in terms of usage, they were not as widespread as the cloud patterns. Because the cloud patterns were balanced, there was a sense of movement and harmony. When two sides overlapped, the patterns would not appear abrupt. However, the cloud patterns on the cauldron made by the Xia people seemed to contain more. Since there was nothing else to do and it was almost winter, Xiao Xian would have more free time to study these. After copying all the cloud patterns on the body of the cauldron onto two pieces of cloth, Xiao Xian went to the shamaness to ask about some older languages. However, the shamaness did not know much. She could only read about things from hundreds of years ago from the records of her ancestors. However, most of the records passed down by Yanjiao's ancestors were written by the shamaness. Most of the language used was also from the other side and not the local language. Since he could not get the help he wanted from the shamaness, Xiao Xian could only think about it on his own. Thinking about these cloud patterns, Xiao Xian felt as if he had returned to the time when he was studying the conclusion. Everything in the world was full of order and rules. Whether it was the wild beasts in the forest or the people in various places, the physiological functions of the body also operated normally because of order. A person's sense of hearing, smell, and other bodily functions acted on the brain for a long time. It had a subtle influence on people's creations, which led to the creation of various arts and skills. This sense of order was also fully reflected in the symbols and patterns created. For example, the cloud patterns that Xiao Xian was looking at now. There were many, but not messy. The person who created such a complicated and natural cloud pattern must have pursued a sense of balance and order in his creation. Only in this way could the cloud patterns on the body of the cauldron be produced. Then, under order, what did such a complicated combination of cloud patterns represent? Xiao Xian stared at the cloud patterns for a day but could not figure out anything. After thinking about it, Xiao Xian went to the forest to pick up some leaves. The leaves that fell on the ground had already turned yellow, but they had not withered. The leaves were wider, and each one was larger than an adult's palm. They were also thicker. After picking up the leaves, he dried them under the sun and stored them for later use. At the same time, Xiao Xian also made a square sand table. The sand table was not deep, about 1 square meter in size. Xiao Xian picked up a branch and drew on the sand table. The combination of the complex cloud patterns seemed too difficult. Xiao Xian tried to divide the cloud patterns into several pieces and draw them on the sand table. Every time he separated a cloud pattern, he would draw a single cloud pattern on a leaf. After spending 5 days, Xiao Xian finished disassembling the cloud patterns on the cauldron. It was only a preliminary disassembly. He did not know if it was correct or not. Because there was no comparison, no one could tell Xiao Xian whether it was correct or not. Art existed in exaggeration and rendering, and the artistry of the pattern made it much more difficult for Xiao Xian to disassemble it. After thinking for 5 days, in addition to eating, drinking, and going to the toilet, all the time was spent on disassembling. When he finally finished drawing the last cloud pattern, Xiao Xian was tired. With dark circles under his eyes, he ate a large pot of mountain fruit and meat soup. After a good sleep, he walked out of the house. Although the yangguang outside was not as bright as before, for Xiao Xian, who had been cooped up in the house for 5 days, it was a bit dazzling. After recovering from his trance, Xiao Xian planned to go to other places at the foot of the mountain to relax. It was not necessarily beneficial to be tense all the time. Maybe he could get some inspiration by walking around. Recently, the temperature had dropped sharply. Almost every day, the temperature difference from the day before could be felt. Looking into the distance from the mountain, a lot of yellowed trees could be seen 5 days ago, but now they were much thinner. Recently, the people who went out to trade had all returned. Not only did Duo Kong bring people to trade in Amba City, but there were also people who went to other tribes to trade, silk fabrics, and other things. Some of the hunted meat was hanging outside to dry. Walking down the road, Xiao Xian saw many beast heads and legs hanging in front of every house. Seeing a familiar figure, Xiao Xian shouted, "Zhao Ming, what are you doing?" Zhao Ming, who was carrying fruit into the house, looked in Xiao Xian's direction and said happily, "Xiao Xian." "Elder." Xiao Xian looked at the fruits wrapped in big leaves. These were all kinds of fruits that were rarely eaten in the tribe. He asked, "What are these for?" "To make soup." Some fruits were not eaten directly. The tribesmen used them as seasonings to make soup. "No, these are for the tapers." Speaking of this, Zhao Ming's face was red. Xiao Xian remembered that he brought back a nest of tapers from hunting. Both the big ones and the small ones were brought back in a net bag for Zhao Ming to raise. "Where's your brother?" "Not at home." Xiao Xian scanned the house and did not see any adults. He went to chop wood with the others. Zhao Ming brought Xiao Xian to see the tapers he raised. The little tapers were bigger than when Xiao Xian brought them back. Their fur had grown thicker. The colder the weather, the more fur these tapers would have to protect them from the cold. When they saw Xiao Xian come over, they all squeezed towards the mother model. The big ones and the small ones all nested in the corner with branches and dried grass. "They're quite energetic. You raised them well. You can eat them when they're a little bigger." Xiao Xian looked at the tapers and said. Xiaobi's mother said that these tapers will grow faster after winter. They don't eat much in winter, so they grow slower. Zhao Ming thought of something and said happily to Xiao Xian, "But when they grow up, I won't eat them anymore." "Why?" Xiao Xian was confused. Didn't these little kids always drool when they saw the wild animals in captivity? Why wouldn't they eat them? Zhao Ming smiled, showing his white teeth. He did not speak, but faint patterns appeared on his face. The patterns were gradually deepening. It was not as fast as Xiao Xian's, but it was definitely deepening steadily. Totemic patterns? Xiao Xian was shocked, then smiled. Congratulations, you're about to become a totemic warrior. Although he had heard about it from others, it was Xiao Xian's first time seeing a tribesman who did not awaken during the ceremony. Perhaps this was the difference brought by the disappearance of the fire seed. The fire seed had been integrated into every Yanjiao's bloodline. As long as they reached the boundary of awakening, the fire seed in their bloodline could help them awaken at any time. There was no need to wait for the ceremony. As for why Zhao Ming said he would not eat tapirs, of course, it was because once he became a totemic warrior, he could eat higher-level beasts, such as fearsome beasts. Even if he could not eat them, he could exchange them for other things. It was not a loss. After walking around the foot of the mountain, Xiao Xian was called up by Guang Yi, who was carrying a large bundle of firewood. Before this, Xiao Xian did not go out. He looked like he was busy with something, so no one bothered him. Now that Xiao Xian had come out, they called him up the mountain to talk. After spending so much time together, Guang Yi, who had face blindness, finally had an impression of Xiao Xian. Although Xiao Xian's face was still blurry, he could recognize Xiao Xian just by looking at the bone ornaments Xiao Xian wore. Winter is coming. The shamaness said it will start snowing in 3 days. The chief has been discussing the winter hunt for the past 2 days, Guang Yi said to Xiao Xian. Usually, when winter started, there would not be heavy snow. The tribe would organize a hunt, and when it started snowing, they would not go out. After going up the mountain, Duo Kong asked Xiao Xian if he wanted to go for the winter hunt. The winter hunt had its dangers. Not everyone was suited for it. I'll go, Xiao Xian said. He wanted to use this opportunity to hunt a better prey to make a ceremonial animal robe for the ceremony. Winter here was not long. After the end of winter, there would be the most important ceremony of the year. This was also the first ceremony Xiao Xian attended since he came here. Chapter 399. After the snowfall, the forest was covered with a layer of white. Xiao Xian went out to hunt with the hunting team. Most of the beasts were thick-skinned but hairless. They rarely came out in the winter, so most of the beasts they hunted were hairy, which could be made into fur coats. Because of the participation of Xiao Xian, the elder, many people participated in the winter hunt. Everyone was very enthusiastic. In addition to hunting, Xiao Xian also went to the dry riverbed to fish some stones back. When he was free, he would make some glowing crystals for everyone to use. The winter night would be darker, so the crystals would make it easier for everyone to move around. During the winter hunt, Xiao Xian hunted a hairy giant beast, which he used as a sacrificial animal clothing. When the snowfall in the forest increased, the people in the tribe stopped going out. The river around the tribe was also frozen, so there was no need to build a bridge. They could walk directly on the river. The children in the tribe liked to play on the river. For the people in the tribe, winter meant boredom. Every day, they would gather in groups of 3 to 5 to exercise their muscles and bones, and teach the new warriors. Since they couldn't go out to hunt, they could only use other ways to vent their energy. Xiao Xian spent most of his time in the house studying the cloud patterns. Occasionally, he would come out for some exercise, and then he would study again. Sometimes, he would ask the craftsmen in the tribe for advice. Their craftsmanship came from their ancestors, who learned it from them, and then summed up their own experience and passed it down from generation to generation. They had a good understanding of the casting and forging styles of each faction, and had a lot of contact with the works of the Xia people. However, the craftsmen in the tribe didn't know much about the cloud patterns that Xiao Xian asked about. The craftsmen did give Xiao Xian some handwritten notes from their ancestors. Because the craftsmen sorted them out by themselves, they were messier than the ones left by the shaman. Some of them were missing parts, or they weren't clear. Xiao Xian could barely read them. In order to express his gratitude, Xiao Xian gave them a few glowing water sun stones, which made the craftsman very happy. He spent the winter studying cloud patterns and making water sun stones. When Xiao Xian heard the cheers outside, he realized that winter had already passed. Winter came late here, and the days where they couldn't hunt weren't long. This made Xiao Xian unable to react when he heard the noise outside. It's over so quickly. Xiao Xian stood up and shook the leaves off his body. He pushed the door open and walked out. Because of Xiao Xian, some families in the tribe also used the water sun stone. Even on a moonless night, other than the light from the fire, some sparkling lights could be seen. And now, the two crescent moons that had disappeared in the sky had reappeared. From now on, the sky would be illuminated by them for the next year. The moon came out and winter was over. The most important thing for the tribe was to offer sacrifices. They were in different places, but the time was synchronized. There was no such thing as day on one side and night on the other. No matter which Yanjiao tribe it was, they all used the moon in the sky as a reference. It was just that they didn't know if the exact time was the same. The shamaness finalized the time and announced it. The tribe began to get busy preparing for the sacrifice. Xiao Xian was the only elder of the two tribes. His position was second only to the shamaness and the chief. Of course, he had a lot of weight in the sacrifice. In the past year, the awakened warriors would sit closer to the front during the sacrifice. Because from today onwards, they would officially become part of the tribe's combat power. Even if they couldn't start hunting immediately and needed to go through a period of adaptation and training, they should have the awareness to become strong. They couldn't continue to play around like children all day long. When night fell, all the tribe members gathered. The fire in the fire pit had been lit by the shamaness. Xiao Xian, the shamaness, and the chief stood closest to the fire pit. Looking at the fire in the fire pit, as the shamaness chanted, Xiao Xian suddenly had a feeling that there was also a fire on the other side far away. He couldn't help but look in that direction. Far away on the other side of the sea, in the old haunt of the fearsome beast mountain forest, it should also be the day of the sacrifice. There was no communication, but their hearts were connected. The shamaness originally wondered if the ancestral bone ornaments would appear again in today's sacrifice. But as she chanted, she found that the fire in the fire pit was especially active today. It was even more vigorous than the day they welcomed Xiao Xian. What was going on? The shamaness shared some of her attention and focused on the fire pit. Since the fire seed disappeared, the fire pit had only changed greatly twice. The first time was when they welcomed Xiao Xian last year, and the second time was now. Whoosh, the fire rose without wind. It was like a giant beast waking up from hibernation, waving its sharp claws and roaring. The fire rolled up, and the totem of the two horns appeared clearly. This time, it was much clearer than last year's ceremony to welcome Xiao Xian. This change also surprised the tribesmen who were paying attention to the fire pit. They had never seen such a change before. But Xiao Xian had seen it before, and more than once. The first of the three flames of the fire pit, soaring flame. As if to confirm Xiao Xian's guess, soon, the fire in the fire pit rose up in an instant. At the same time, many flames flew out from the fire pit. The fire was fainter than the one in Xiao Xian's memory. It was not so much a flame, but a reflection of the flame. Looking at the sparks in the fire pit and the flames flying out one after another, the tribesmen were stunned and didn't know what to do. The shamaness looked at the scene in front of her and murmured. At this time, she had a guess. She suddenly turned her eyes to Xiao Xian, wanting to get an answer from Xiao Xian. The second flame of the fire pit, soaring flame. Xiao Xian whispered. Synchronized. The fire pits on both sides were synchronized. Even across the sea, even though the situation on both sides was different, at this moment, at tonight's ceremony, the fire pits on both sides were synchronized. On the 4 bone ornaments worn by Xiao Xian, the crimson beads emitted flames. Like last time, the eruption of flames wrapped around the surroundings and then formed a flame giant that rose from the ground. Because of the previous experience, everyone was a bit calmer this time. They were only shocked by the floating flames that looked like shadows. This was the first time in their lives that they had seen it. It was strange, but there was an inexplicable sense of intimacy in the bottom of their hearts. The tall flame giant slowly turned around and looked in one direction, which was also the direction Xiao Xian was looking at before. At the same time, in another place far away, in the ferocious beast mountain forest. The Yanjiao tribesmen at tonight's ceremony were worried about Xiao Xian, who had disappeared for a long time. Since Xiao Xian's disappearance in the desert, the shamanists had sent people to investigate. It took a lot of effort to find out that Xiao Xian had been hunted down and jumped into the sea. He hadn't been seen since then. Because of this, the Yanjiao tribe had almost started a war in the desert. But later, everyone was called back by the shamanists. Xian is still alive. The shamanists held the box containing the elder's bone ornaments and told everyone with certainty. Tonight, many people thought of Xiao Xian, but they didn't expect a flame giant to suddenly appear in the fire pit. If Xiao Xian was here, the flame giant would have calmed them down. But now, Xiao Xian wasn't here. The flame giant that appeared didn't have any other reaction because of the kneeling crowd. The huge figure formed by the flame slowly turned in one direction. The shamaness looked at the light emitted from the box containing the elder's bone ornaments and was so excited that her hands trembled, almost shaking the ornaments out of the box. He found them. Xian must have found them. The others didn't understand what the shamaness meant. They only knew that Xiao Xian was still alive. That was enough. When will he return? The shamaness asked in a trembling voice. The others thought that she was talking about Xiao Xian, but Chief Ao knew that she wasn't talking about just Xiao Xian. After the sacrificial ceremony, no matter which branch they were from, their hearts were not at peace. The Yanjiao people in Fearsome Beast Forest were wondering when Xiao Xian would return. The shamanists and Chief Ao were wondering if Xiao Xian had really found the other Yanjiao people. On the other side of the sea, everyone was wondering what the flame giant was looking at and what the ancestor was trying to convey. Some people guessed the reason and couldn't sleep that night. Chief Xing Luo sent a team with Xiao Xian to the shore where Xiao Xian had come ashore to see if there was a passage under the sea. But they returned in disappointment. Xiao Xian didn't even see the passage that he had come from, let alone a safe passage. They probably didn't meet at the right time. Even if they did, Xiao Xian felt that other than himself, there might not be many people who could safely pass through there. It was impossible not to be disappointed. Even though this place had a rich culture and they could live well here, Xiao Xian still wanted to go back and take the Yanjiao people with him. Building a ship? With their current technology, they might not be able to build a ship that could support such a long journey. There were also many giant beasts in the sea. One tail could overturn them all. The danger was no less than the passage under the sea. After thinking about it, Xiao Xian felt that if the bridge under the sea could be raised, then everyone could go from one continent to another just like they did 1,000 years ago. Unfortunately, he didn't have the ability. Forget it, he would wait for another chance. Or maybe he would find another way. By the time they returned to the tribe from the shore, the weather was already warm. Some people had already started to try planting in the small fields of the tribe. Even if they didn't plant much, as long as they could produce something to relieve the pressure of food, it was worth it. Besides, the shamanists had told everyone that hunting was important, but so was planting. This skill could not be neglected. There was still some time before the next hunt. Looking at the people working in the fields, Xiao Xian asked some experienced growers some questions. He remembered that he still had some things in his hands. Xiao Xian still had some of the 1,000 gold grains that he and Ji Ju had stolen from the rats. He had thought about planting them when he brought them back, but it was already the end of the year and he had other things to do. Xiao Xian didn't think about it anymore. He took out the bag of grains. These grains had been dried by Xiao Xian. They didn't look as bright as before, and the husks were a little dark. Looking at these dark golden grains, Xiao Xian put them away and took them to find experienced growers. In this climate, they should be able to try planting, right? Chapter 400. The weather was getting warmer and the air was humid. But when the sun came out, the humid air was gone. Xiao Xian took the small bag of grains down the mountain and went to the tribe's farmland to discuss it with someone. A few days ago, he asked an elder in the tribe who was good at farming. He planned to bring the grains to the elder today and ask for his opinion and suggestions. Xiao Xian knew about farming. But after coming to this world, he didn't recognize most of the plants because they didn't even exist in the other world. Not only that, but after coming to this world, Xiao Xian was blind again. Although he knew some, the main crops here were different from what Xiao Xian knew. Their growth habits were also very different. Xiao Xian could only ask someone who was more experienced. Most of the tribe's farmland was at the foot of the mountain. From the mountainside to the foot of the mountain, there were plots of land. Each plot was planted by several families. As for how the land was distributed after planting, the tribe didn't care. Xiao Xian came to a plot of land near the foot of the mountain. An old woman with a head of silver hair was sitting there. Her name was Chi Chi. Her mother was from the Taiha tribe. The Taiha tribe was better at farming than the Yanjiao tribe. They had a better grasp of many techniques, so Chi Chi knew more about farming. The people who worked in the fields often came to ask her questions. "You're here." Chi Chi saw Xiao Xian and quickly stood up. In many tribes, people had to pay their respects to people of high status. Yanjiao also had this kind of etiquette on important occasions. But it was usually more casual. Chi Chi obviously still felt that she had to bow to Xiao Xian. But as soon as she stood up, Xiao Xian stopped her. Xiao Xian didn't say much. He took out the bag and poured out a few grains. "Take a look at this." Chi Chi's attention immediately shifted to the dark gold grains in Xiao Xian's hand. These were grains that she had never seen before. After taking a closer look, Chi Chi shook her head. "This is the first time I've seen such a grain." "Is this the 1,000-grain gold you mentioned?" "Yes, that's it." Xiao Xian had told Chi Chi where he found the 1,000-grain gold. After some consideration, Chi Chi suggested that Xiao Xian find a place similar to where he found it. That way, it would be safer. No one knew what kind of environment this plant liked to grow in. There were all kinds of plants. Some liked the sun, some liked the shade, some liked the humidity, and some liked the drought. They couldn't be lumped together. "However, Elder, you can plant some in every place. When the time comes and you see which place has the best growth, you can plant them there." Thinking about how Xiao Xian said that these grains were extremely rare and precious, Chi Chi paused. Since it was rare and precious, how could she waste it like she did with other seeds? But looking at the dark gold grains in Xiao Xian's hand, Chi Chi's heart itched. She wanted to try planting these rare grains. As someone who had been farming since young, these few grains were very attractive. Even if she hadn't eaten them before, she could give a rough evaluation just by looking at them and smelling them. They were very attractive. But Xiao Xian was an elder and these grains were very precious. She couldn't ask for them. Sensing Chi Chi's gaze, Xiao Xian thought about the 1,000 grains in his hand and counted 100 for her. "If you have time, can you help me plant these?" For someone as experienced as Chi Chi, it would save Xiao Xian a lot of trouble. It was better than Xiao Xian messing around. Chi Chi hurriedly promised, Of course, of course. Don't worry, Elder, I will do my best." As she spoke, she took out a cloth bag and carefully took the 100 grains from Xiao Xian. She decided to discuss this with her fellow farmers first. They would carry out their plan after they came up with a plan. If she succeeded, she would definitely get more benefits from Xiao Xian. But to Chi Chi, the most important thing was that she could try planting something so rare. This would give her a sense of achievement. After giving the grains to Chi-Chi, Xiao Xian looked at the people working in the field. Everyone used many types of farming tools, such as plowing, watering, harvesting, threshing, etc. Many of them learned from the slave masters in the 6 tribes. They were very useful in plowing, planting, processing, etc. These tools were mostly made of wood and stone. It was said that the slave masters used bronze tools. But in the tribe, no one could bear to use bronze tools. Stones and animal bones were also good substitutes. After looking at them for a while, Xiao Xian went back to find some materials and improve the tools. He even made a plow for them to cultivate the land. Xiao Xian's plow was simpler than what he had planned because of the limited tools. It was also made of wood and stone. After a few attempts, he improved and perfected the plow to make it lighter and easier to turn around. It was easy to operate and its flexibility was satisfactory. This way, the efficiency of farming would also increase. After making it, Xiao Xian went to show it to the farmers and taught them how to use it. Perhaps the slave masters already had similar farming tools, but this was the first time the people in the tribe had seen it. They felt it was new and very happy. As soon as Xiao Xian brought the plow over, everyone surrounded it. "Elder, what is this? Can this be used for farming?" Everyone was curious. The plow was a farming tool. Usually, it was tied to the animal that pulled it, such as a cow. But there were no domesticated animals here, so it could only be pulled by humans. Luckily, the Yanjiao tribe had a lot of manpower, so it was easy for them to use it. "That's it. Use it to break up the soil and make trenches." I saw that everyone was busy preparing for the planting of seeds. This plow should make it easier for everyone. After the demonstration, Xiao Xian gave the plow to the others to try it out. Many people wanted to try it, but it was snatched away by Chi-Chi's granddaughter. Ji-Ling was only 15 or 16 years old. She was as beautiful as a flower and had already awakened her totemic power. She had just returned from a hunt a few days ago, so it wasn't her turn to patrol. She had nothing to do, so she came to help Chi-Chi. She didn't expect to see Xiao Xian with the plow. She rolled up her sleeves and squeezed the others to the side. She copied Xiao Xian and started to plow. Another middle-aged woman helped from behind. Ji-Ling stopped when she came across a rock in the ground. She didn't use a knife. Instead, she reached out and dug out a rock the size of Winter. She didn't even look at it. With a toss, she threw the rock far away. Xiao Xian saw the rock the size of a winter melon draw an arc in the sky. It flew over the river in front of the tribe and landed in the forest far away, startling a few birds. He turned his head and looked at the field again. Ji-Ling was pulling the plow while sharing the feeling of pulling the plow with a few hunting companions who were rubbing their palms together. Xiao Xian was speechless. In the tribe, women were like men, and men were like ferocious beasts. Those who worked in the fields weren't all people who hadn't awakened their totemic power. Most of the time, totemic warriors were the ones who did the hard work. After all, they didn't have hunting shifts every day. Girls like Ji-Ling, who Xiao Xian thought looked like a flower, also worked in the fields like the others. In the tribe, there were 2 kinds of people. One was the weak group who hadn't awakened their totemic power, and the other was the warriors who had awakened their totemic power. At this time, many people were busy sowing seeds. Xiao Xian didn't know until now that other than the fields in the tribe, there were also people who were planting seeds in the forest on the other side of the river. However, unlike the meticulous planting in the tribe, they were more casual in the forest, and still used the primitive method of burning sticks. First, cut down the weeds, vines, and bushes in the forest, and then set fire to them. After the rain, when the soil was wet and soft, they did not plow or dig. Instead, they planted some seeds, and the burned vegetation became fertilizer for these seeds. When sowing seeds, the people in the front poked holes in the ground with spears or other tools, and the people behind would put the seeds into the holes. After planting, they didn't take much care of it. Sometimes, they would go over to take a look or chase away the birds and beasts. After all, their main source of food was hunting, followed by the fields in the tribe. As for the fields outside the tribe, they were just there to pass time. As long as they harvested more than what they sowed, they would be satisfied. After harvesting what they planted, they would move to another place, and the original plot of land would be idle. They would wait for a few years, or even longer, before moving back to plant again. There was a lot of land here, and the forest was big, so they could afford it. Xiao Xian didn't plant the seeds in the fields, nor did he go outside the tribe. He used a wooden fence to enclose a 70 square meters of empty land behind the house. After doing some preliminary work, he planted 100 grains. The 1,000-grain gold was discovered on the top of the mountain. Xiao Xian lived on the top of the mountain, not far from the top. Although the mountain wasn't high, Xiao Xian didn't feel safe planting it on other mountains. After all, there were too many birds and beasts on other mountains, and Xiao Xian couldn't keep an eye on them all the time. Different mountains had different climates and geology, but Xiao Xian didn't think too much about it. He just wanted to try it out. Speaking of which, he wasn't very interested in planting the 1,000-grain gold, and wasn't obsessed with it. It would be good if he could plant it, but if he couldn't, he would just cook the remaining grains and eat them. After so long, he should still be able to eat them. After a while, the seeds behind Xiao Xian's house sprouted. Out of 100 seeds, more than half of them had sprouted. Xiao Xian was very satisfied with this. But when Xiao Xian was called over by Qi Qi, he realized that most of the grains had already sprouted 2 to 3 leaves. With 100 grains, the survival rate was more than 90%. It was much better than the ones in Xiao Xian's backyard. She was indeed experienced. Seeing the seedlings, Xiao Xian was happy too. It didn't matter who planted them, as long as they were alive. Qi Qi and the rest were even more excited to see the seedlings. Every day, when they had time, they would go and look at the seedlings. They found spots from the top to the bottom of the mountain, and planted 10 grains in each spot. At this stage, the seedlings at the bottom of the mountain were growing the best. Chapter 401. On this day, Xiao Xian came back from a hunt and heard that the Taihe tribe was there. Although there were occasional conflicts between the two tribes, there were still interactions between them. After the trade trip at the end of last year, the relationship between the two tribes improved. They hadn't quarreled since then, at least the leaders of the two tribes didn't quarrel. Why are the Taihe people here? Xiao Xian asked the person beside him. I heard it's about farming. They're at the field. The person who spoke was obviously unhappy. The Taihe tribesmen were better at farming than the Flaming Horns. Everyone had to admit that the Taihe tribesmen could not only grow crops, but also herbs. Every year, many of the herbs they brought to trade were actually grown by themselves. The Taihe tribesmen had a much larger area of land. Unlike the Flaming Horns, the Taihe tribesmen placed a lot of importance on farming. As for why the Taihe tribesmen came to visit the Flaming Horn tribe's fields, it was because the Taihe tribesmen had a sense of superiority when it came to farming. Every time they came, they would act arrogantly as if they were teaching the Flaming Horn tribe. This was the reason why there were so many small-scale arguments. But from the tribe's point of view, the shamans were happy to see this kind of academic exchange. Although there were arguments, it was worth it if the Yanjiao people could learn more. Thinking about the 1,000-grain gold that Qi Qi planted, Xiao Xian put down his prey and walked towards the field. Xiao Xian didn't ask Qi Qi to keep the 1,000-grain gold a secret. Qi Qi even asked Xiao Xian if they should hide it if the Taihe people came. Xiao Xian refused. It would be better if he could get some useful advice from the Taihe people. He didn't have to worry about the Taihe people playing dirty. At least until now, the Taihe people hadn't done anything like that. After asking around, Xiao Xian went to a place near the mountainside. There were already many people there. Xiao Xian remembered that there was also a piece of land there that was used to plant the 1,000-grain gold. Chi was in a good mood today. In the past, when people from the Taiha tribe came, they would always give them some pointers. Their choice of words wasn't too tactful and they took pleasure in attacking them. It wasn't easy for them to find a way to attack the Yanjiao people, so they naturally wouldn't hold back. But today was different. Even though the Taiha people caught some mistakes, the incident with Li and the 1,000-grain gold distracted them. When Xiao Xian walked over, 2 Taiha tribesmen were discussing something around a plow. The others were with Chi, standing beside a specially fenced field. There were only a few seedlings in the field. As for the people around the fence, their eyes were shining as they looked at the seedlings. Seeing Xiao Xian walk over, Chi bowed as usual and introduced the people from the Taiha tribe. After being ridiculed so many times, Chi wanted to return the favor. When she introduced them, her expression seemed to be saying, "Look at these bumpkins, they haven't even seen a plow before." After being ridiculed by Chi, the Taiha tribesmen's expressions froze. It was rare that they didn't retort back. Instead, they quickly put on a smile, as if they were close relatives. One of them coughed and walked forward. Quan Bai from the Taiha tribe is here to make a deal with Elder Xiao Xian. At the end of last year, they had already heard about the glowing crystals from their trading team. They had sent people to probe the flaming horns a few times, but the flaming horns kept their mouths shut. They couldn't find out anything useful at all. This time, the chief had the intention of letting them trade with the flaming horns. They wanted to exchange some glowing crystals for them to take a look. Originally, they thought that if Xiao Xian wasn't here, they would look for someone else. The other Yanjiao tribesmen also had glowing crystals. They didn't expect to run into the Yanjiao hunting team today. "You want the water sun stone?" "Of course," Xiao Xian said. "But what do you want in exchange?" "What does Elder Xiao Xian want?" Quan Bai asked. Usually, in a trade between 2 tribes, bronze wares were rarely exchanged. Most of the time, animal hides or other items were used. Taiha tribe had more herbs. Quan Bai thought that Xiao Xian would directly ask for precious herbs. But after thinking for a while, Xiao Xian said, "How are the craftsmen of the Taiha tribe?" Quan Bai frowned. He didn't understand why Xiao Xian would suddenly ask this. Did he think that the craftsmen of the Yanjiao tribe weren't good enough and wanted to ask the craftsmen of the Taiha tribe to make bronze wares? In terms of craftsmen, the Taiha tribe was quite good. Thinking about this, Quan Bai said proudly, "The craftsmen of my tribe are naturally very skilled. Although they aren't as good as the masters of the 6 tribes, they are still better than." Quan Bai was about to say, "better than Yanjiao," when he saw Xiao Xian look over. He remembered that he had something to ask of him, so he changed the topic and looked at the other tribes with disdain. But they are still much better than the Fox tribe and the other tribes. As for how many tribes were included in the word "other," he didn't say. Xiao Xian nodded and asked, "The Taiha tribe has passed down their craftsmen for thousands of years, right?" Quan Bai's heart skipped a beat. Was this kid trying to steal their craftsmen? No way. Quan Bai was cautious, but he didn't show it on his face. He only said, "Before Yanjiao came here, the Taiha tribe had already made our own tools. But compared to the people of the 6 tribes, we are still far behind. Can I talk to the craftsmen of your tribe? I have some questions." Quan Bai and the other Taiha tribesmen were on guard. Xiao Xian said, "Don't worry, I'm not asking about craftsmen. I'm asking about other things." Quan Bai and the others relaxed when they heard that he wasn't asking about craftsmen. But they were still on guard. Some things could be brought out for discussion, but other things should be kept in their hands. For example, they would never tell anyone about the cultivation methods of their tribe's precious herbs. Craftsmen were one of them. They could process it, but they wouldn't reveal anything about it. Seeing that Xiao Xian only wanted to talk to the craftsmen, the matter of the glowing crystals was settled. They could go back and report to the chief. But Quan Bai and the others glanced at the few seedlings inside the fence. One of them poked Quan Bai's back, signaling for him to bring it up. Quan Bai thought for a moment and said to Xiao Xian, "Elder Xiao Xian, do you have any more 1,000-grain gold?" Xiao Xian glanced at them. "What? Do you want it? If you do, we would like to trade with Elder Xiao Xian." Quan Bai's eyes were filled with anticipation. Quan Bai had even pinched an inconspicuous part of the seedling when Chi Chi wasn't paying attention. Then, he sniffed it and tasted it. His eyes widened, but he suppressed the desire in his heart and tried his best to calm down and negotiate. "Sure, I'll make a decision after I talk to your craftsman," Xiao Xian said. He wanted to talk to them before making a decision. Quan Bai and the others panicked. Who knew how long this would take? If they missed the best time to plant the seeds, it would be a huge failure. They would be letting these people down. But Xiao Xian had made up his mind. He couldn't change it. They knew that Xiao Xian was forcing them to arrange an exchange with the craftsman, but they had no choice but to follow. The Taiha tribesmen wanted to drag this out, but after a discussion, they arranged for an experienced craftsman to talk to Xiao Xian. Not only was this craftsman better than others in terms of skill, he also had to be smart. If he was a little stupid, he might accidentally let Xiao Xian use all his skills. Then it would be too late to cry. The craftsman had also done his best. He was extremely alert when he met with Xiao Xian. He was thinking about how to avoid the Flaming Horn Elder if he brought up the matter of forging. What he didn't expect was that Xiao Xian didn't ask about the craftsmanship but about the Xia people. Since it wasn't about forging, the craftsman relaxed and told him what he knew. As for the cloud pattern Xiao Xian mentioned, the craftsman didn't know much about it. Thinking of something, the craftsman said, "I remember that in the records left by my ancestors, there was something about the Xia people's cloud pattern." Xiao Xian was disappointed but perked up when he heard this. "Your ancestors studied the Xia people's cloud pattern?" The craftsman nodded. "It seems so." But after they passed away, no one paid attention to the Xia people's cloud pattern. In fact, the craftsmen of the Taiha tribe wanted to imitate the Xia people's products because they could sell for a high price. The Xia people's most typical cloud pattern was the complicated cloud pattern. But when it came to forging, they realized that the seemingly simple cloud pattern was extremely difficult to imitate. Just a little bit would result in a much worse product. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that it was fake. The craftsmen studied for their entire lives but couldn't figure it out completely. But they did find some clues and wrote down their findings in the notes they left for their descendants. But the descendants of the Taiha tribe weren't interested in imitating other people's products. Gradually, they stopped paying attention to it and only glanced at the notes occasionally. To the Taiha people, the Xia people's cloud pattern belonged to other people and not their tribe, so it wasn't classified as a secret. These were items that could be traded. However, the notes couldn't be given out so easily. The craftsman promised to go back and sort out the notes and write a copy for Xiao Xian. When Xiao Xian saw the notes, he was overjoyed and gave him 3 glowing crystals. This was something that the Taiha tribe had already discussed. They even felt that they were getting a good deal. As for the 1,000-grain gold that Quan Bai and the others wanted, Xiao Xian took out 50 of them and the Taiha people exchanged for it with herbs. Xiao Xian asked Duo Kong to discuss the rest with them while Xiao Xian took the notes back to study the cloud pattern. One had to admit that the craftsmen of Taiha had indeed wanted to carry on the path of imitation to the end. Unfortunately, they had kicked an iron door and could not open it. The cloud patterns of the Xia people looked simple, but it was always difficult to understand. Luckily, the notes they left behind inspired Xiao Xian. Although they couldn't completely decipher the cloud pattern, their ideas and the questions they answered made Xiao Xian's mind light up. In the following days, Xiao Xian locked himself in his room to decipher the Xia people's cloud pattern. Then, Chi Chi came to him dejectedly. Seeing Xiao Xian's bloodshot eyes, Chi Chi was shocked. "Elder Xiao Xian, did you fail too?" "Fail what?" Xiao Xian rubbed his eyes and asked in confusion. The things I planted. Ha! Planted what? The 1,000-grain gold, of course. Xiao Xian, he was so busy deciphering the cloud pattern that he completely forgot about the 1,000-grain gold in his backyard. Chapter 402. Chi-Chi's words reminded Xiao Xian of the precious 1,000-grain gold in his backyard. It was said that the more precious something was, the more fragile it was and had to be protected. Xiao Xian sighed as he thought about the sprouts and the days he had been cooped up in his house. He no longer had any hope. When Chi-Chi saw Xiao Xian's reaction, she realized this elder had probably forgotten about the 1,000-grain gold and did not care at all. If it had been anyone else, Chi-Chi would have started scolding and beating them up. However, this was the elder of the tribe, second only to the chief and the shaman. He was also the owner of the 1,000-grain gold. She did not dare to scold him, much less beat him up. No matter how furious she was, she could only take a deep breath and suppress her emotions. Then again, her own crops had all failed, she had no right to criticize him. It was a pity that this young elder was too young and did not realize the importance of the 1,000-grain gold. Chi-Chi sighed. Let's go take a look. Xiao Xian tidied up the thick, dry leaves beside him that served as a notebook, then brought Chi-Chi to the backyard. Previously, when he heard that Xiao Xian was planting some precious crops here, Duo Kong specially brought people over to wrap a piece of cloth around the wooden fence to prevent the naughty kids from kicking pebbles and other things inside. That was why these few days, not just Xiao Xian, even the people who walked past Xiao Xian's house every day couldn't see what was going on inside. Those who were curious did not dare to peek into Xiao Xian's house either. The elder's position was very powerful in this aspect. He had lost all hope, but when Xiao Xian opened the back door and looked into the yard, he realized that there were many green sprouts swaying in the wind. The last time Xiao Xian looked, only half of them had sprouted, but this time, there were more than 80 sprouts. The last 30 sprouts had probably sprouted later, so Xiao Xian did not notice them last time. The sprouts were not very tall, only a little taller than Xiao Xian's ankles. Although they were growing slowly and did not look very energetic, they were still alive. This. Chi-Chi looked at the small yard and the sprouts on the ground. She was so shocked she did not know what to do. She quickly walked forward and looked at the ground. Because no one had watered or fertilized them, some parts had cracked. Elder, how did you plant them? Chi asked Xiao Xian. I planted them like you did. You saw it the last time too. I watered them a little when they sprouted, but I did not use the fertilizer. Xiao Xian pointed at a vat in the corner. It was the fertilizer Chi-Chi had given him. Chi-Chi had told Xiao Xian to water the sprouts when they grew. But Xiao Xian had forgotten about it when he got busy. He had put all his attention on the cloud patterns and did not remember about the sprouts, fertilizer, and watering. Chi-Chi did not doubt Xiao Xian's words. She had occasionally gone up the mountain to talk to Xiao Xian about the 1,000-grain gold sprouts. But every time she came, Xiao Xian would close the door so she did not disturb him. This time, it was really urgent and she had to knock on the door. Looking at the sprouts, Chi-Chi's face was full of guilt. Elder, I have disappointed you. What's wrong? Are there problems with the sprouts? Xiao Xian asked. Chi-Chi's face was red and she felt even more guilty. She did not know what to say. It was not just problems. The sprouts that were growing well were starting to wilt. Chi-Chi brought Xiao Xian to a few fields. From the top of the mountain to the bottom of the mountain, the situation was similar. It was fine at the start and everyone was happy. But as they grew, they started to wilt. Chi-Chi told Xiao Xian about the sprouts' growth. Xiao Xian could not understand it either. Chi-Chi and the rest had taken good care of the sprouts. They should have been growing well when they first sprouted. How could they wilt? Could it be that they did not have enough nutrients? Chi-Chi and the rest had prepared the fertilizer and watched over the sprouts every day. When they heard Xiao Xian say that the area where they found the 1,000-grain gold was dry, they reduced the number of times they watered the sprouts. They only watered the sprouts according to the situation. Not acclimatized. They had sprouted leaves and were growing well at the start. But as they grew, they wilted and died one by one. Chi and the rest were heartbroken. The few elders did not sleep for a few days. They discussed and tried all sorts of methods but to no avail. Now, there were only about 20 sprouts left in the 10 plots of land. They were much taller than the ones in Xiao Xian's backyard. They were knee-high but they were wilting. They were even worse than the ones in Xiao Xian's backyard. Thinking about it, Xiao Xian couldn't come up with a reason. Then, "Elder, what should we do next?" Chi asked carefully. She was worried that Xiao Xian would scold them. When Xiao Xian gave them the seeds, they promised to do their best. But in the end, they failed to live up to Xiao Xian's expectations. Xiao Xian thought about the progress of deciphering the cloud patterns. He did not plan to stop halfway. It was rare for him to find an idea. He did not want to stop and think about other things. Compared to the 1,000-grain gold, he was more interested in the cloud patterns. The more he understood, the more he felt that the cloud patterns contained a huge secret about the Xia people. After thinking about it, Xiao Xian said, "How about this? Please help me take care of the sprouts in my backyard." Ah! Chi looked up in shock. Xiao Xian's decision was not only not to scold them, but also to entrust them with important tasks. How could she do that? But Chi was still curious about the sprouts in Xiao Xian's backyard. She wanted to know if the sprouts were still alive because they were not tall enough or because of other reasons. But what if the sprouts? Chi tugged at her muddy clothes nervously. She was in a dilemma. "Don't worry. Even if all the sprouts die, I will not blame you. They are hard to grow anyway. Since they can't be grown, I will cook the remaining grains for everyone to eat," Xiao Xian said. Chi's face twitched. Such precious seeds were eaten. After Xiao Xian made his decision, he followed Chi's suggestion and opened a small door at the wooden fence in the backyard. According to Chi, they would definitely go over every day. They might even go over a few times a day. It was inevitable that they would disturb Xiao Xian. They just had to open a small door at the fence in the backyard for her to enter. They would take care of the other things themselves. Xiao Xian did not need to care. That afternoon, Xiao Xian made a movable door at the wooden fence. Since no one would dare to barge in, he did not even need to tie a rope. Closing the door, Xiao Xian's eyes swept across the courtyard. He felt that something was missing. When he was about to enter the house, he suddenly stopped at the door. Xiao Xian looked down at his feet. At the back door, there was a weed. When Xiao Xian entered, his trousers swept across the weed, so he noticed it. Weed, he turned around and looked at the yard. He thought back to the time when the 1,000-grain gold sprouted. Xiao Xian remembered that there were many other unknown weeds growing in the yard. At that time, Xiao Xian was thinking about the cloud pattern. He planned to wait until the seedlings were bigger before getting rid of them. Who knew that he would wait until now? It had been more than 20 days. Xiao Xian did not even go out for a hunt. It had been more than 20 days, and in such warm weather, the annual weeds should have grown even more vigorously, right? But the truth was, there were only a few weeds in the yard. Most of them were spread far away from the seedlings. The weeds from 20 days ago were long gone. Xiao Xian found a thick leaf without writing and recorded this discovery. He would look at it later. After entering the house, Xiao Xian continued to decipher the cloud patterns. He could already decipher the general meaning of the cloud patterns. Although he had only deciphered 2 cloud patterns and there was still a thick stack of cloud patterns to be deciphered, it was good to have some progress. Xiao Xian would decipher all the cloud patterns on the cauldron. In the following days, other than going out to hunt, Xiao Xian spent most of his time deciphering the cloud patterns in the house. As for the 1,000-grain gold seedlings in the backyard, he would only occasionally take a look at them when he was resting. When he came back from his hunt, Xiao Xian asked about the situation of the Qi seedlings. In the 10 plots of land on the mountain, only 2,000-grain gold seedlings were still alive. They were the 2 slowest growing seedlings. They didn't look like they could last much longer. The 80 seedlings in Xiao Xian's backyard were also growing faster under the care of Qi and the rest. The seedlings in Xiao Xian's backyard were almost as tall as the seedlings they took care of before. However, when they reached this height, it was as if they couldn't cross the threshold. They changed their growth pattern and started to wither until all of them died. That was why Qi and the rest were worried as they watched the seedlings grow taller by the day. For the sake of the seedlings in Xiao Xian's backyard, Qi even invited some people to the Taiha tribe to exchange their experiences. They wanted to lower their status and learn something useful from the Taiha people. If they could take care of the seedlings, they would be able to answer to Xiao Xian. However, the situation in the Taiha tribe wasn't good either. They only lasted a little longer than them. Once the seedlings reached that stage, they withered. When Qi and the rest went over, the Taiha people wanted to go over to Yanjiao to take a look. Fertilizing the land, plowing the soil, improving the soil, everything was done. The seedlings were so healthy. Why did they wither in the blink of an eye? As expected of the precious 1,000-grain gold. They were so hard to take care of. Everyone was worried. Because of the Taiha people's meticulous care, the seedlings grew too quickly. Although they were planted later, they were still growing faster than the ones in Xiao Xian's yard. But once the seedlings reached that stage, they withered. There was no helping it. They heard that only the ones in Xiao Xian's backyard were left. Hence, the Taiha people went over to Yanjiao every day to take a look. Seeing that the seedlings were growing faster under the care of Yanjiao and Taiha people, and that they were about to reach that threshold, Qi and the rest were even more worried. They couldn't sleep at night. It was as if they had an anxiety disorder. Xiao Xian, on the other hand, had been deciphering the cloud patterns behind closed doors. He did not experience their fear at all. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.